Welcome to the Fruiting Body Podcast with your host, Brendan O'Neill. Today we have a lovely guest on our show. This is John Dalley from Soi Dog Foundation. He is the co-founder. We're going to dive deep into his backstory, how we do it here, how he got to Phuket, what he's doing here, and his future plans. He's a well-known, familiar face on the island, so I don't need to do too much of an introduction. So, again, I always forget to say this, but like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. And without further ado, Talise, kick that intro. We're here with John Dalley, the co-founder of Soi Dog Foundation. So first, thank you, John, for being with us today. It's much appreciated, especially out of your busy day. And I told John we kind of wanted to jump into a more important topic, especially while we're fresh in the podcast. And we're going to start discussing right away about the Yulin. Yulin?
Yeah, the Yulin Festival.
Yulin Festival, yeah.
Okay, well, the Yulin Festival, or Dog Meat Festival as it's become known, actually started as a lychee festival. And you have to bear in mind that Yulin is a big city, and it's in one of these southern provinces of China, where you have dog meat is prevalent in that those three provinces, and also one in the northeast. Now, it was dwindling a bit, so the local dog meat traders decided to try and increase sales by holding this festival in July every year.
How long has it been going on for?
Not that long. It's a dog meat festival, and I have to tell you now, it doesn't exist anymore as such. So it started, well, it was within, I lose track of time these days, certainly within the last 10 years. Prior to that, it was a lychee festival. And obviously it brought, the very fact that it was called a dog meat festival brought it quite a lot of notoriety in the West, and huge amounts of protests, etc. Can I just...
Oh, it's your phone, sorry. Yeah, no worries.
Is that my phone? Yeah.
Is it my phone?
I thought I'd switched it off. Sorry, just a minute. Let me switch this off.
It's okay.
For us, it's fine.
Can you...
Don't worry.
It puts me off when it's ding, ding, ding. So it's turned to, I put it on airplane mode, but it still gets messages through. And it will go, emails will be continued.
Oh, don't worry.
Okay. Sorry about that. So do you want me to take that back?
No, so
no, it's fine. You can continue.
You can
keep move on.
With it, yeah. So you're talking about the Yulin Festival, and I actually thought it's been around for hundreds of years.
No.
That was my understanding.
No.
Okay.
I mean, eating dog meat across Asia is relatively recent in terms of, if you like, mass consumption. What you've got to remember is, I mean, in Vietnam, for example, which is the second biggest consumer in the world after China, it didn't, if you look at the history of the what they call the American War, the Vietnam War, there's no record at all in the south of Vietnam of anything regarding towards dog meat. It was actually introduced by Chinese military advisors. And with obviously, when you get during the war, the shortages of food, people will eat anything, doesn't matter what society you come from. And so dogs were a plentiful supply of extra meat. And that's how it developed. It's been practiced for hundreds of years by hill tribes, nomadic hill tribes, who even, who spread into Thailand as well, in the far north, in Chiang Rai area.
Yes.
And they have practiced eating dogs just as they practice eating other animals that followed them as they moved around.
Is that just because food is scarce when you're in these areas?
Yeah, I mean, but also because you've got, there was no sort of population control, so you've got dogs breeding and whatever and puppies. You get excess animals, and it's food, so they would kill them and for eating food. And it did develop that they started then to kill dogs for particular festivals, and gradually these sort of beliefs crept in about dog meat being increasing masculine virility and all the rest of it.
And this has been happening in these hill tribes. Are you talking thousands of years, or?
Well, certainly, I'm sure it's documented how far back it goes, but certainly for the last, 300 years, are documenting it in hill tribes. But in terms of it, as these hill tribes, I mean, for example, stick to Thailand, Chiang Rai is a good example. As these hill tribes prospered, particularly through the opium trade in the many years ago, they moved into the cities and towns and took this with them, and so you started to see dog meat restaurants open in places like Chiang Rai and Chiang Mai. Similarly, in the northeast, you had refugees from Vietnam, not from the war, but from
Northeast Thailand.
Northeast Thailand, coming over religious persecution, Catholics, who came and moved into the northeast of Thailand, particularly in Nakhon Phanom and Sakhon Nakhon provinces. And in fact, there's a town in Sakhon Nakhon called Ta Rare, which was sort of the capital of the dog meat industry in Thailand, and also the dog skin industry, the tanning industry. And it's an unusual town if you go up there. You'll see there's a Roman Catholic cathedral, and there's a nunnery, and you'll see nuns walking around. It's very Catholic. And this was predominantly Vietnamese who introduced dog meat, again, into that area of Thailand.
Now, is this the industry trying to prosper and introducing this new meat to strictly for, capital gains? And
yes, exactly. I mean, this is what's occurred. Obviously, people who trade in dog meat, like if you're in any business, will try and advertise their product and try and tell people this is good for you and whatever, because dog meat is not cheap wherever it's consumed.
And to kind of put a stamp on the time period, when was this happening in this area where the Vietnamese were introducing dog meat over into northeast Thailand?
Oh, this goes back to sort of 20, 30 years ago it started.
Because of the Vietnamese War and
well, no,
that is,
I mean, in terms of exporting dogs from Thailand to Vietnam, I mean, you're talking post-Vietnam War. I mean, the Vietnam War ended, now nearly 50 years ago.
Yep.
So you're talking post that. So you're talking in terms of 20, 30 years ago, this trade that we know of. I mean, when I moved to Thailand, I didn't know that existed. And it was only when I saw an article in the Bangkok Post of a photo of a truck loaded with over 1,000 dogs that had broken down on the side of the road in Laos, saying, 1,000 of these dogs, just explaining the picture. And I thought, well, God, I never knew that. And one of the reasons we called it, in fact, a documentary film that was made about it called The Shadow Trade, because 95% of Thais didn't even know it was going on. It was quite local to that area, northeast of Thailand. Even though the people getting the dogs were travelling throughout north and central Thailand, acquiring dogs. They used to call them bucket dogs. They'd go into poor villages with their trucks, and they would literally exchange dogs for plastic buckets, and later on often for a few baht or whatever. And these would be excess dogs again, unwanted dogs from villages, and this is how they got them, and they would grab them off the street.
So the trade was they're getting them from villages, they're bringing them to this kind of remote northeast Thailand.
Exactly.
1 sec, we'll fix that. Northeast Thailand, it's the city or the province, and trading it to Vietnam. That was kind of the business model there, and kind of keeping it out of the.
It was illegal even then because of the disease laws. The Rabies and the Anthrax Act actually meant that if you wanted to take a dog or send a dog to Vietnam for any purpose, it has to have a rabies vaccination and paperwork to prove that and to be microchipped. Now, of course, that costs money, takes time, not happening. The dogs were actually smuggled across the river because, as you know,
the Mekong,
the Mekong is the border between Thailand and Laos, not Vietnam, but Laos. So you would get trucks going to the border, and these long-tailed boats were literally the dogs stuffed into cages. And I mean, if you've ever seen these cages, you would get a cage generally about 1.5 meters by 90 centimeters, a meter wide, and about that high. So, I mean, we've got examples of them at the shelter, which we show visitors. And they would stuff up to 12 dogs into one of these, average-sized dogs, literally stuffing them in. And then stacking these cages one on top of the other on the backs of trucks. Then they would just slid down the bank onto these long-tailed boats, smuggled at night, smuggled across the river. Once they got across the river, they were home free, and then stacked onto big trucks, like the one I saw in the photo, and then driven for many hours to.
So they're taking it through Laos into Vietnam.
And that was what the trade consisted of. And the reality is, of course, that many of these dogs, particularly in the bottom of these trucks, would die from suffocation. Many, it doesn't matter if a leg was stuck out of these cages, would just be slammed. So you got many that were, it was inherently cruel practice from start to finish. I mean, if people argue what's wrong with eating a dog as opposed to
a chicken
or a pig or a cow or whatever, and it's a valid question to ask. I mean, I could link that there are reasons why I would argue there is a difference, but nevertheless, which I can go into if you want.
Yeah, I think that is
I will do. But just before we get to that, but bear in mind, even in countries like Vietnam, there are regulations saying whether they're fully followed, same as they are always in Western countries, including States or Canada, from where you're from. Slaughterhouses have high standards in terms of how you kill an animal.
The ethical practices.
Whether it actually happens that way is another matter. Yeah. But that's, by the way, there is at least some control. What you have to bear in mind is in no country in Asia, excepting South Korea, is dog meat recognized as livestock, as meat. There's no laws governing dogs. The killing of dogs, the transportation of them anywhere.
The difference between a chicken, a pig, or a dog, they're all considered livestock? Is this what you're saying?
They're all considered livestock except dogs.
Except dogs.
And there are in every country in Asia, there are laws stating how you should be transporting, killing, and processing the meat. And all across, doesn't matter which country. There are no laws in any country, except Korea, governing dogs. So they can be transported, killed in any way the slaughterhouse deems fit. So you get these extremely cruel practices to the extent that in some areas in Asia, not all, but in some areas of Asia, it is believed that if you inflict pain on an animal, it increases the adrenaline.
Yes. And
the adrenaline improves the texture of the meat.
More tender.
Well, the actual fact, scientifically, the opposite is true, but nevertheless, the texture, people believe this. So again, inflicting pain on the dog before it's killed. Often they're killed while they're still alive, thrown into deferring machines, boiling water, etc., alive. So there are a lot of inhumane practices involved in the killing of dogs, and the transport itself is pretty horrendous. So
is that part of it to make this meat?
No, the transport is the transport is just getting as many dogs over in as you can cheaply, and
saving
stuffing them
shipping,
to as many as possible into a cage means more in terms of getting more onto a boat, onto a truck, and so forth. So
and was this a massive industry between Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam? And is it still, or when did that all change?
No, initially at its peak, going back to sort of 2011, when we were involved in it heavily, started getting involved in it heavily, the Thai Veterinary Medical Association estimated that there were 500,000 dogs a year in Thailand involved in the dog meat industry. Now, that included not only the dogs being shipped to Vietnam, but also dogs being killed locally for their skins, and also for the local dog meat trade, both in the northeast
and they are consuming it in Thailand in these provinces.
Yeah, and also dog was being processed for other purposes, so it would be sold. For example, meatballs. I mean, I don't know if you may remember there was a case in Europe recently where they discovered horse meat being sold into meat pies and not being declared. Similar thing in Thailand. You could go and buy meatballs in Bangkok, and it could be dog meat or part dog meat, so without it being declared as such. So that was happening, and that would be byproducts often of the skin trade.
And the entire, the population of Thailand has no clue this is going on. This is kind of hidden in, would you call it the black market at this point?
I would call it, we called it, well, the trade was certainly to Vietnam was a undercover trade. I mean, but although there was a lot of, obviously, you probably appreciate, there's a thriving trade not only in dogs at the time, but also in wildlife, drugs, of course, and people. and obviously there's a huge amount of corruption goes on. That facilitates it. I mean, I was up there on one occasion with the local Mekong River unit from the Navy, and they were showing me various places, and literally we stumbled across a crossing as we drove up towards the river. There was a guy just leant against a car, got on his phone, and immediately the foot was down on our van as we rocketed down towards the shore, because they knew straight away this was warning that was there. It wasn't dogs, it was actually, as we got there, the truck was just pulling away, but it was ice and everything on the side of the road, and from what they saw, bits of sign, little bits of meat, it was bear parts that they were smuggling across.
What was your agenda at that time? Why were you
heading over? We were building relationship up with the river police. We wanted to see examples of the crossing points that were being used. They knew were being used, and this was in broad daylight. And as we left that area, we could watch them. We followed up river. They were on the other side of the river going up. You could see where they landed. There was a proper building there where they were unloading. And as we left, you could see other people on the Thai side on every road who were obviously, and they pointed out to me.
Part of that industry.
Yeah, they pointed out to this big estate which was guarded with gates and everything, owned by one of the principal smugglers.
Yeah.
So these are all known, but proving it, and again, these people are paying huge bribes.
Did you ever feel scared, like, as you're getting involved in these black market industries, you know, and trying to protect what's going on, especially for the dog side, did you ever feel threatened or scared with your life?
No, I wouldn't say. I mean, I did used to keep my eyes open for motorbikes and pulling, coming up behind with one point, because it became known, obviously, that we were financing, in effect, a reward system. We were rewarding the police, etc., for interceptions, successful prosecutions, and number of dogs intercepted, as a way to counter the corruption that was happening on the other side. We were literally trying to fight fire with fire at that time, which resulted in the interception of thousands of dogs. So that did, obviously we're interfering with their business, and these people are quite, you'll see if you look at the photos of the time of the police and the Navy intercepting, they're all armed with rifles and whatever.
This is 2011.
This is between 2011 and 2014.
Yeah.
So it took about 3 years. And then it started to die down. It was improved also. At that time, there was the early 14, we had the military coup.
Yeah. This is the first one, I believe, that came in.
The last one.
Yeah.
And it was, one of the benefits, if you like, it was of the coup as far as we were concerned, was that the military government were keen to push forward popular bills, probably to do themselves more to the public. And there'd been an animal welfare bill on the statute for a long time, but it always sort of run out of time, etc. And they chose that as one of the bills that they would push through. And I had meetings with Thai people as well, obviously, with the generals who had taken over the various departments, Department of everything was sort of run by
the
generals.
Opposition, would they be in those meetings as well, or they were kind of running with the tail between the legs and trying
at that
to
time? This was very shortly after the coup, bear in mind. So, the Thai Parliament was in session, and I was fortunate to be able to go there and actually address the Thai Parliament at one stage, and managed to get in terms of introducing what was then the Animal Welfare Act, which was a very basic act, but at least it did bring in some form of animal welfare into Thailand, which included, this very thing I had to specify, that it doesn't actually state in the law, if you read it, dog meat is illegal, but it does state that it's illegal to kill a dog or kill domestic animals for food without approval of a veterinarian. A veterinarian is the only person really illegally able to kill a dog or a cat or that sort of animal. So it in effect made it illegal and led to sort of shutdown of local restaurants, and we were able to pursue local restaurants, and also a shutdown of the skin trade, which was
at least to remove it out of that area.
Yeah, to remove it. I mean, I'm not saying, don't get me wrong. If you ask me, right, does nobody now eat dog meat in Thailand? It's like asking me, does anybody not take drugs in Thailand? Of course they do, and people will still snatch
But
jugs.
does that industry still exist in that area, or
No,
would
not
you
in
say-
terms. We have no evidence of any widespread smuggling or widespread collection of dogs.
Yeah.
We've no evidence of it. Do people still smuggle dogs across the border? Yes, we do have some evidence of that. We know local. The border is very open. People from Laos.
I mean, it's the Mekong. It's massive.
The Mekong. They crisscross all the time.
Yeah.
And we've caught one or two, or not our agents have caught one or two people trying to smuggle 4 dogs or something in sacks across for local restaurants in the Vientiane area because they eat dog meat. Laos.
So you're talking more on Udon Thani, Vientiane.
Yeah, and further over on the border. For the name of the provinces now.
Liao, some.
Yeah, the bonus of provinces that are just over the border from Vientiane.
Yeah.
So you've got that still going on, and no doubt there are people eating dog meat still in Isan and in the far north of Thailand.
But at a much smaller scale now.
Much smaller
the industry, scale. It's more for like personal use. It's not, it's not industrial. It's not.
You may have seen in Phuket even. You'll see signs in Phuket. We've got them in various locations. I mean, there's one not far from me at Wat Bandon Temple. They're in Burmese, Thai, and also Cambodian, warning people that it's illegal to kill dogs for meat, and there's pictures of those go behind prison and warning that you face up to 2 years in prison or a 40,000 baht fine. The reason for that is because obviously you've got a lot of migrant workers here on building sites who do eat, and also from the northeast Thailand, who do eat dog meat, who would eat dog meat. And we know of cases where dogs have been, certainly in Phuket, have been snatched by local workers. We're always having problems with snares.
Why are they doing that now? Because they don't have the funds to purchase the meat. It's cheaper, or is it a delicacy? What
it's
are the
two
reasons?
things, I think. I mean, this goes back not long before COVID. In fact, we see less of it now. But we're getting a lot of dogs now in hospital to sadly lose their legs and whatever because they've been caught in snares. Now, reality is that people do lay traps and whatever in the jungles and whatever to try and catch wild pigs and whatever.
Okay.
Now, it could be that some of them, if they catch dogs, happily will kill the dog and eat the dog. But a lot of them, the dogs will chew the way out and they'll often chew the legs off to get free or whatever. And they'll also probably, we find them with wire and whatever still fastened to them. And whoever has laid the trap has probably they're not going to touch the dog, but they've cut the trap and the dog's been let go. Sadly, more often not, that dog will lose its leg. But it's, we get them. We had one yesterday come in. It's exactly that.
And it's they're jungle dogs getting trapped in snares, like in let's say what's the national park, maybe by Naithon, like these type of areas, like where it's pretty much rubber plantations. And
people forget. I mean, I do also do hiking these days as well, but the 70% roughly of Phuket is actually covered in jungle.
Yeah.
People think, how can you get lost? This guy got lost the other week in Nayang Beach. How do you get lost in Phuket? Very easy, I can tell you, because the jungles are very dense, very thick. And so local people do, there's people who plant rubber trees up there and whatever. There are tracks, but people will go and try and trap wildlife. And they will, maybe not on purpose, but some maybe, quite happy to catch dogs as well. Very difficult to catch people.
But is that illegal, what they're doing, if they're setting traps for, let's say, wild pigs?
It depends where it is. If you go into a national park, for example, the biggest national park is the one near Talang that runs right up almost on the eastern side of Thailand, where the Gibbon Rehabilitation Project is.
Yeah, and you can take that thing, I heard, on dirt bikes pretty much all the way to Chalong. Like different.
You can. Yeah,
maybe you go in and out on the road a couple times, but pretty much that whole back mountain.
But these are declared. That national park, for example, is declared. It's a no hunting zone. Okay. So they specify this is no hunting area. It's also you're not supposed to farm or plant rubber trees there. I was in that national park just 2 weeks ago, and there's rubber trees. I thought, well, the national park starts here, and there's people farming with fruit trees and rubber trees, probably illegally. I don't know, or maybe they've got the border marked wrongly on the map. I have no idea, but nevertheless, officially speaking, no, they shouldn't in a national park where it is declared a no hunting zone. But there's plenty of forest is not. where they are, as far as I'm aware, there's nothing to stop.
I mean, there's always a fine line. I mean, and these people, they might have been living there for who knows how long, maybe a couple generations, and they kind of end up claiming the land, essentially. Yeah. So to take a step back on that, we were talking about the Yulin festival and how this all connected, how we'll connect ourselves back to that. What is your foundation doing to maybe prevent that, or to
what
slow
we do,
obviously
down? We do in terms our main area of focus at the moment continues to be Thailand in most of the work we do. We also have a project going on in Vietnam. We've been working with the People's Committee of Hanoi, and we've had to pay for the survey, but nevertheless they've approved us to carry out a survey on all dog slaughterhouses and dog meat restaurants, etc., everything dealing with dog meat in Hanoi. And our view obviously is there, and we've got with the mayor of Hanoi, it's just changed, but generally speaking, to try and get the dog meat trade ended in Hanoi. What people don't realise as well is that it is a health issue. Again, there is no laws governing dog meat, no inspections of restaurants or anything, and it is filthy. You go into the slaughterhouses there; they are absolutely disgusting, the conditions in them. And there have been many documented cases of outbreaks of cholera resulting from the conditions of people who eat dog meat because of the condition of the meat and the filthy conditions that are associated with it.
Yep.
It is also, obviously, we also have done tests on dogs that have been slaughtered. Several hundred dogs have been slaughtered. You have to test on their brains, which have been done in Hanoi and also verified by the US CDC to verify the percentage of dogs that are carrying rabies. And bear in mind, these dogs are generally not caught in Hanoi. They're transported illegally, again, across provinces in Vietnam.
Can they pass this on by if you were to consume this meat, rabies
depends on what it is. Where there are documented cases of people who have died from rabies and their only connection is eating dog meat, but they would have to probably eat it undercooked. The reality is, I'm not trying to tell you, well, don't eat dogs because you could catch rabies.
Yeah.
Handling the dog meat, if you got the saliva on as you're killing, the blood or the saliva, and then didn't wash your hands or something, you could catch rabies. If you ate it raw, and some people do eat dog meat raw for whatever reason, you catch. If it's properly cooked, you're not going to get you won't get rabies from eating dog meat. I'm not going to pass on inaccurate information.
But this area in Hanoi, it's legal to still process the dog meat, or
it's not illegal. This is the question. Yeah, it's not illegal. That's what part it's a borderline thing.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the slaughterhouses, even for recognised meats, are illegal in Hanoi. This is things we found out. It's just and again, there's a lot of corruption going on. So you have to bear that in mind as well, of course. I'd be very dubious about what I ate.
What about the population? What is their opinion on that in, let's say, Hanoi? Are they for? Are they against? Are they like?
Generally speaking, mixed. I think what you're finding generally in Asia, you're finding the younger generation who are becoming far more aware of animal welfare, the environment, generally things like that are far more opposed to it. We did a survey some years ago now in Vietnam when we did a project there when we were working on stopping the trade from Thailand, because we held meetings with the Vietnamese authorities as well. And we were pointing out the fact that rabies is being they have no way of knowing that whether any of these dogs have got rabies or not. And that is something that ASEAN nations jointly originally it was 2020, they were going to eliminate rabies in the ASEAN region. Yeah. And Vietnam were the lead nation in this. They give different nations have the lead. Vietnam were the lead. So we're able to point out to them that here they were trying to abolish rabies, and yet they were spreading rabies from country to country, because some of these dogs will escape, and some of these dogs, whatever, so they were doing. So we were able to use that argument. And one of the arguments I used in meetings we had is with the US CDC and People GART, that's the Global Alliance for Rabies Control, We had the Thai Department of Animal Health there. We had the Lao Cambodian government representatives, as well as the Vietnamese. This was in Hanoi. Second meeting in Bangkok was to get across, look, you're not going to end rabies by ending the dog meat trade, but I can guarantee you it'll never end whenever you allow it to continue in the manner it is now. So they really put them on the situation where they looked a bit foolish not to have agreed to ban the import of dogs from Thailand, Cambodia.
And when was this meeting happening?
This was in 2014.
And what has changed since then?
Since then, I mean, that was since then, obviously, there hasn't been the trade to Vietnam at all. That was the other reason why it stopped, because the Vietnamese put a block on it. Are there still dogs going into Vietnam and cats going into Vietnam from other countries? Sadly, I think probably there are. We know that dogs are being rounded up dogs are eaten in Cambodia. The borders between Cambodia and Vietnam in the south are a lot easier to cross. In the north, they're not. There's only certain crossing points because it's all jungle. And there are only certain crossing points that on the main routes across from Thailand to Vietnam. So very difficult to go off-road and cross. But there are also, we know cases where truckloads of cats have been intercepted coming from China into Vietnam. Yep. So there are other animals being imported into Vietnam from other countries for sure.
Would they be going by boat from like the south
road,
of...
Road.
Like always road. Yeah.
Road, yeah. And, so it's still going on. But again, it's a bit like what happened in Thailand. You've got a lot of poor villages in the centre and south of Vietnam, and so you'll get people collecting dogs, maybe paying $1 or $2 for them, if that much, to local
for a
villages.
Single dog. And are you talking about what size are these dogs at this point?
Well, you're talking, you see the average size dogs.
Like a soy dog.
Yeah, exactly. The same throughout Asia.
Yeah.
They're basically Asian. At one time they were known officially and breed-wise as Asian village dogs. Now obviously you get a lot of mixing, but generally speaking, a traditional Asian dog you can see. Yeah. And so that sort of average-sized dog. And what happens to those dogs on the journey, most of them end up going to Hanoi in the northern cities. We'll go first to, I forget the name of the place, but it's a village in northern Vietnam. And the whole village is based around the dog and cat meat industries. And it's like a wholesaler.
North of Hanoi?
No, south.
South of Hanoi. South of Hanoi.
Yeah, on the main, just off Highway 1.
Maybe, what do you got out there? You got Da Nang.
It's not Tares, the Thai town. It's not that big. You probably wouldn't recognise the name. I'm not talking a big city. It's just a village that is literally nothing but dog meat trade. And that's where the Thai dogs used to go. And they're hauled in huge
And that's quite the journey to be traveling from Thailand all the way out there. I mean, that's got to be, at least a day and a half in a truck.
Yeah, and exactly. And they're held in a lot of them were held in the jungle in Thailand as well, because they're basically, we've got plenty of documented photos of these places where they're literally being held in the jungle, in the cages, for often a week or two until the Vietnamese buyers would come and pick their dogs they wanted. The ones they didn't want would be used for local skin trade or local consumption. And
just for the meat and the skin, what is the size of, let's say, the dog industry in terms of US dollars?
Oh, you're talking millions of dollars.
So we're not getting into the hundreds of millions?
Yeah, you work it out. If you tell me in terms, I used to have these figures to my but it's now a few years. But in Vietnam, dog meat was, it cost more than, you'd pay more for dog meat than you would for chicken or pork. And that's why it was pushed as a
delicacy almost.
Yeah, almost. And it was in Vietnam, to give you an idea how it differs from Korea. In Vietnam, they believe it's at the end of the lunar cycle. It's good luck to eat dog meat. The beginning, it's not. So the sales of dog meat fluctuate.
But this is their winter, their lunar cycle. So you're talking February or...
Well, throughout the year, but particularly the peak time would be through the Tet period in winter. It's believed it warms the body, and as well, it's good luck to eat dog meat at certain times, but bad luck at others. In Korea, of course, there's now it's July, August, you have the Botnai Festival, when the vast majority of dogs are consumed over a 6-week period on the belief that it cools the blood. So these are all nonsensical beliefs.
Complete hocus pocus.
Yeah, but it's a belief, again, and it's passed down on what people believe.
Yeah.
And it's what the traders play on to increase sales, and they tell, it's very popular in Vietnam with young men to eat dog meat with beer, that's going to increase their libido and their prowess or whatever. The reality is, in terms of beer, I mean, if you know science, it has the opposite effect, but nevertheless,
and on your side, have you ever tried it just to understand what was going on, or did you completely?
No, sorry, no, I would never tried dog meat. No, I used to eat meat. I mean, this is a personal view. I mean, I'm not vegan or vegetarian even. I do eat seafood. I choose not to eat meat because I've been inside slaughterhouses and things. I just find. And I've seen how even here in Thailand with pigs, I've seen pigs hacked to death on markets. Because
you understand the process and what's
the process, and I choose not to. But that's my personal belief. I don't preach to people. I don't say you should not be eating meat for God's sake or whatever. That's down to the individual. That's down to an individual's choice, and I respect their choice. People though that say they see nothing wrong with eating dog meat, I would happily take to see the whole process and then ask them if they still think the same thing. I'd also argue in terms of dogs that bear in mind, man never bred dogs for meat. If you go back historically,
to be domesticated to,
they were actually originally to guard
an alarm system,
to guard livestock and to guard homes. That's what they were bred for, and that's why you have these different breeds over the years being bred for different purposes. And it's only really in the last couple 100 years they've been developed more for pets. And you get the smaller breeds developed from the bigger breeds, lap dogs and this sort of thing. But they were never bred specifically for meat. And the only places you will find dogs reared for meat is on dog farms in Korea. And if you go into one of those and see those places, they are horrendous.
Are they like fatty dogs now? They're
big Jindo, they're big breeds, Jindo breeds, or they'll take any dog that's unwanted as well from small ones. But they're big dog breeds, and literally they're fed just liquidized waste, and they're crammed in there. They never see light of day. They live in cages with open bars, which it's allowed so the feces builds up in piles or drops through onto the next dogs. It's filthy, it's horrible. They're pumped full of antibiotics to try and stop them dying from diseases, which again leads to antibiotic resistance for people that eat it. Korea has the highest incidence of antibiotic resistance.
And this is South Korea as well.
This is South Korea.
So, and this is still continuing. This industry worldwide is still there today, even predominantly in South Korea. Do you see this disappearing anytime soon?
I mean, it's becoming less popular, as I said, because of the attitude of people. I mean, we keep drifting off the subject. You want to go back to Yulin? We don't actually work in China. There's a lot of groups do, but we have helped in China. We had a group in China who actually got dogs that had been rescued by somebody else or weren't mentioned and then abandoned, and they came and they were left volunteers and got these dogs, and we helped them get them to the US. But that was a few years ago, and we don't directly. I don't particularly. A lot of people will go in both Korea and China, and they will rescue dogs, what they call rescue, or they will buy dogs from dog breed, from markets, from whatever, and they shut down dog meat farms in Korea and buy them out, and then they're stuck with the dogs because you can't adopt them in Korea, because in Korea they'll only adopt small dogs because everybody lives in apartments.
Yeah, it's quite small, the house.
So they have to try and then spend a fortune getting them to other countries or whatever. I made it quite clear that our policy is not to do that. The reason is because you're doing nothing to end the dog meat trade. In actual fact, you're encouraging it. I remember a reporter, well-known reporter who works for the Mail, the UK, a freelance reporter, who I was working with at the time, who was in Yulin, calling me, says, "You wouldn't believe it. Half the hotel staff are going out asking permission for time off to go into local villages to buy dogs to bring back to sell to activists, because activists were paying huge amounts of money to rescue these dogs." because they would be raising huge amounts of funds, donations to do it. But the reality is the dog meat trade is a business. It's a market. It's a market, and it's like any business based on supply and demand. You go in and you buy dogs, you're just condemning other dogs to death to replace them, because wherever there is a market for it, people will do it. So what we focus on very much, it doesn't help much with raising money, but we focus more on education and also on advocacy, working with trying to persuade governments to change the laws, which is what we did in Thailand. That's what we're trying to do in Vietnam.
Your side, when you're getting your funding and sponsorships, most of this is going towards the educational side, and obviously a large percentage has to be going towards your sanctuary as well.
I mean, we operate now. Soi Dog is the largest animal foundation in Asia dealing with domestic animals, dogs and cats. And our main focus is to solve the problem of no more stray dogs and cats. I mean, it might sound fanciful, but you have to have a mission. And unless you start on that mission, you never get anywhere. I often say, you don't climb a mountain until you've taken the first step.
What is the goal, though? If you were to map out the goal, if we want to make it to this point by this year, what is that? Do they put numbers on that? Are you able to quantify it?
Well, we're able to quantify in terms of our main focus, which is in effect reducing the number of stray dogs and seeing a day when there's an end to animal cruelty and an end to stray dogs, where there are nobody wants to see stray dogs on the streets, whether you hate dogs or like dogs. Yeah. So that's the goal. Now, that's a huge, ambitious target. As I said, if you'd have seen Phuket 20 years ago, most people probably wouldn't remember that far back, you would have gone to any street, anywhere in Phuket, any time of the day, you would see stray dogs everywhere, most of them in horrendous condition. And the situation when we first arrived, came to Phuket, was getting worse, not better, because nobody was actually doing much about it. People were feeding dogs.
And was it dangerous at that time too? Because sometimes the strays, they get very territorial, and
you didn't generally see much in the way of packs of dogs. Generally, people come. Listen, there are different types of dogs going around. Most dog attacks are actually from owned dogs, right? Because Thai people generally do not lock their dogs away, and dogs are, as you pointed out, territorial. Feral dogs, truly wild dogs, are generally frightened of people, and they will run away from people. You get it's very rare to read, you've seen these occasionally in the paper, and it's always front page news of a pack of dogs on the beach or something have run after or attacked somebody. That's very unusual. But most of these dogs are generally have got their own territories. They probably live on the beach, and they're being fed by restaurants to keep people away, to protect the restaurant. So they do develop their own areas for sure. And obviously you've got what we call community dogs. And local villages are often quite happy for dogs to live on their area, and they'll feed them. They won't say they're my dog or take responsibility for it if it gets sick. But nevertheless, they're quite happy for it to be there, because they will bark and they will warn if they see strangers around. And they'll chase people off. But the vast majority of people I know have ever been bitten by a dog. They've been walking past somebody's drive or whatever, garden, and a dog's rushed out and bitten them. And that dog belongs to that house.
Yeah, and he's being territorial towards them.
And that's, but it's always, it's the stray dogs to blame. But generally speaking, stray dogs are frightened of people. I mean, if they weren't, we spend a fortune every year on catching dogs, because they're not easy to catch, are the stray dogs, and at the moment, as I say, we're sterilising now.
Mobile sterilisation now.
Yeah, we have mobile sterilisation clinics. We also obviously have we have a fixed clinic in Bangkok, and we have this obviously hospital, and also have a sterilisation clinic at our centre in Phuket.
Yeah.
But we have 9 mobile teams, 6 of which are operating in Bangkok, which is our main focus at the moment. And then we have 3, one working in Surat Thani, one in Nakhon Si Thammarat, and one latest one is in Phang Nga. We don't have a mobile team working in Phuket anymore. We do some, occasionally we'll have a mobile clinic from operating out of our centre, and they'll go and work in a particular Obor Tor, a particular district. But generally speaking, it's just a maintenance operation in Phuket. we focus on dogs throughout Thailand because we don't do, our mobile teams generally are just doing dogs because dogs are seen as the problem.
Yeah.
In Phuket, I did warn this many years ago. I used to write articles for the Phuket Gazette at the time, years ago when they existed. And I pointed out many years ago, we can solve the stray dog problem here. But bear in mind, if we did and there were no more stray dogs, you got to that stage, you would see an explosion in cats and in wild monkeys. And we saw that. I mean, in areas where there were mangrove trees, you could see where the villages used to have dogs, used to keep the monkeys out. Monkeys are coming in now and going in houses stealing food.
Yeah,
cats,
I saw
there's
this
been
at,
an explosion in population of cats.
Where there's the Monkey Hill in Phuket town.
Yeah.
But at the very bottom of the hill, there's about 20 dogs.
Yeah.
And I think if they're not there, those monkeys are coming down the hill.
Yeah.
And these monkeys, they're vicious though.
Well, those dogs are sort of based on that temple as the base of the hill.
Yeah.
But they're vicious and they will, and they'll snatch and whatever. But the reality is, if you then got rid of the cats, so you've got a stage that'd be far harder to do. You're going to see a huge explosion in rats, mice, and what feeds on them?
Yeah.
Snakes.
Yeah.
And believe you me, rats and mice are already here in large numbers in Phuket.
Well, you see them dead on the road every time you drive down.
And their population would explode. So I used to say to people, be careful what you wish for. Because we could eliminate literally. I think, it takes time because I say the whole purpose. And people say to us, "Why don't you take the dogs?" Well, literally. I mean, March was our record month. We did over 14,000 dogs in March, mainly in Bangkok and provinces.
But then you're bringing them back to their territory.
Where would we put them? We put them back in their territory because dogs, as you pointed out, are territorial. Yeah. They keep other dogs out as well from their territory. And your idea is you move from area to district, doing it in not a random way. We always get asked, can't you go over here to this province and do it, or that province? We don't have the resources to do everywhere in Thailand simultaneously. So we focus on one area and then you move to the next one gradually. And the same within Phuket. You work in one district, then to the next.
What is your process? Like if someone calls you up and said there's a stray dog, it might be causing problems. Do they give Soi Dog a call and then you're going to come in and how would that work exactly?
Depends what the problem is. We'll try and resolve the problem. And we also have community outreach teams. We have 2 teams working full time in Phuket who are actually treating dogs, not only stray dogs, bear in mind, we're also helping people, particularly now it's got even worse with poor people who could not afford veterinary treatment. And that's grown. I mean, we also supply a lot of food to volunteers. And again, they used to get their food often from hotels and whatever. Thai people are this is Thai people, a lot of Thai people.
I'll give an example. There's a dog out front. I forget the name of this dog. I know its name. It's just not coming to my head. And then there's another pack of dogs that stay at the hotel next door. Yeah. And the pack of dogs, they're great. They all get along. But this other dog, he's on the corner. And when the 7-Eleven was open before, it would sit out there. And because of the aircon, it loved the aircon. It would attack every male that went near the place. I must have fed this dog 50 times. It didn't care. I'd give it some treats, because I was tired of this dog. You couldn't even get into if you're at the 7-Eleven, you couldn't get in.
Yeah.
And then the owners would come out and they tried to shoo it, but they're males. So it would just go at them too. And he was helping the guys on the corner that was feeding that was cooking chicken. But those guys cooking chicken, they're only there in the morning till about 1 p.m. So after 1 p.m., this dog is all by itself and it hangs out the 7-Eleven and you couldn't go in. And then if it goes over there, it would attack.
You say
runners.
It was keeping other dogs out, but was it keeping humans
out? It was keeping humans out of the 7-Eleven.
Well, I'm amazed the 7-Eleven put up with that, but there you go.
They kind of just went with it. And I must have given this dog, I'd go give him a steak bone after dinner and he was fine to give it. You couldn't get close to him, but no matter what you gave him, I could go up to him right now. He just gives the teeth, but only to males, not to females. So I think my point of that is when you have a situation like that and someone calls you up, how do you handle it?
Right. We try and see. I mean, first of all, the main thing is to obviously check the dog is sterilised as far as we're concerned, which it would have been already. we'll discuss it in different ways. I mean, we'd often say to the owner something like, we'll try and avoid having to bring it into the shelter for obvious reasons.
Well, this has no owner, this dog.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, we have. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But maybe if it's caught, if the 7-Eleven, they weren't complaining about it, makes me wonder, well, how big a problem was it?
So it wasn't that bad. Yeah, honestly,
that's what I mean, because I would have suggested to them, look, you've got leftovers. Take the dog away. What's surprising, once you get a dog used to going to a certain spot, it will go to a certain spot. Yeah. And generally, I mean, it's unusual for a dog to growl at people going into a shop. I can see it wanting to growl at the dogs, and that's a perfect example of what I mean. Dogs are territorial against keeping other dogs out. Yeah. But unless it saw the shop as its property and then became... if there's a generally dangerous dog, we will take dogs away if there's if it's genuine. But people we've got to be very careful.
This one's. I didn't invite you here today to take away the dog.
No, I understand that, but we're not going to try. Yeah. We have at the moment, and it's got worse since COVID because so many people have left Phuket and have dumped their own pets and whatever. I mean, we have at any one time approaching 1,500 animals in our care at centre here. That includes dogs and cats in our hospitals. We have 2 hospitals, big dog hospital, which is the biggest in Asia.
Right at your
in
by
Phuket. Yeah, and that's not just residents. That includes treatment. But we have, it will be at least 1,000 dogs and cats, so resident dogs and cats. And we've had to buy more land since COVID to extend because of the difficult, and also we're getting less adopted because again, we used to go. So our numbers have gone up from between 900 to 1,000 before COVID to between 1,400 and 1,500 now.
On residents at one time.
That's in residence and in treatment. Yeah. So I'm talking on site.
Yeah.
So, it's we normally have about 200 dogs and probably some number of cats having treatment. So not that off. You're still talking over 1,000 residents. So we still got off Yulin again, haven't we?
No, don't worry about that. That was clear. That I think it was interesting, that part of the story and how you were involved in the Vietnam trade and how that's kind of cracked down. I think that kind of covered that. It was more getting the 7-Eleven dog out of here. No, I'm joking. If someone does call and do you and the dog is, say, quite dangerous, do you send a team out? Do they need to use some sort of tranquilizer to bring the dog in?
We do that.
And where does that dog go from that point if it is dangerous? Does it have to come stay with you? What if it's too dangerous to even go live with the family, but you need to get it out of a specific area?
Yeah, we've got we will not take a dog and relocate it somewhere else, which is, sadly, that's often what... it's the bane of my life, to be honest, are new developments and hotels because they allow the construction phase workers to come in and bring dogs with them. And then they're surprised when the dogs are left when the construction team move on because often they're probably bred, and one of our biggest areas of picking dogs up is construction sites to new to them. And then they're complaining about them. And they will often, if they can get hold of the dogs themselves and then dump them somewhere else. It's just passing the buck to somebody else. And I remember being asked, we used to get calls from hotels from, say, Hotel A, can you come and remove these dogs? So, where do you want me to put them? Would you like me to say, can I dump them at Hotel B up the road? Yeah. Is that what you want me to do? Well, no, what do you want me to do with them? Well, can't you look after them? So you know how much it costs to look after one dog a month, including staff and food. Are you going to pay that? Well, that's your job, though, isn't it? Yeah. No, it's not. We're a foundation. We rely on donations. And you want us to look after your problem, which is you created in the first place by allowing these dogs onto your premises, and now you decide it's causing you an issue. And we'll try and we had very good relationships with some hotels. Classic example I can mention. I'm not going to mention any hotel names, but the Everson Group, for example, that hotel is now gone, but Ava and Sonu, that's where Everson comes from, the owners. We worked with them. They had feeding stations for the dogs on there, which a member of staff would take to them, kept them away from the areas where the hotel, the restaurant areas, etc. and they actually used to call us any issue. Any treatment was needed or whatever. They used to even sell toy dogs to guests, and they would explain to guests that these dogs, cats, were on site, and it was a part of Thailand, but the dogs were cared for, whatever. And if they'd like to make a donation, they could, and they had a donation box. If they'd like to buy one of these toys that Ava had made and everything, they could. And that's what you call a forward-thinking and responsible hotel, as opposed to one that will... just behind the reason we even started Soi Dog when I came in holiday, which, if I go back to that, was, and this is more atypical, and actually tomorrow I'm visiting a hotel.
I think that's a good segue to that, and like I explained at the beginning of this podcast, we wanted to kind of jump more into a heavier story so we could, digest it and be a little bit more fresh on that.
Yeah.
But I've heard a few of your podcasts where you've explained your story, and obviously it's quite clear on the Soi Dog Foundation website of the backstory. But let's give a brief recap to people that might not be aware. First off, what brought you to Thailand?
We came to Thailand to get married.
Oh, okay.
My late wife and I, Gill, we'd both been married before in the UK.
And this is 2003, correct?
This is 2003. Sorry, no, this is 1996.
When you originally came to get married. Okay, I think I've jumped forward to when you moved here.
You have,
okay.
yeah. Okay. So 1996, we came here to get married. I'd always wanted to visit Asia. Gill had visited Asia, parts of India and whatever, but hadn't been to Southeast. So we looked and we didn't want to get married in the Caribbean, where it's basically a conveyor belt sort of system. So we looked for somewhere, and we found, it only just started, actually. You could get married in Thailand at that point. And it was in a brochure, holiday brochure, and you could pick Thailand.
And you're both from the UK?
We're both from Yorkshire. Yorkshire, yeah, north of England. So we plumped for Thailand, and actually the Dusit, what is now the Dusit Thani resort at the time was called the Dusit Laguna, on Laguna to get married at. They were a hotel that offered this service. We were actually the second couple ever to get married there, but that's by the way. And it was not, you had to go to Bangkok and whatever, and it was very well organised. They had somebody to go to the embassy and sort everything out. Cut a long story short, with touring Thailand a bit, and also having been to Hong Kong, we came down here, got married here. We fell in love with the place, and then we used to come back on holiday.
And you're coming back to the same area, Laguna?
Same area. What we try to do, we try to go somewhere different first, and then we'd end up with so we do a week, say, in Borneo, Vietnam, or whatever. We did Malaysia, and then we'd end up coming here. One occasion we went to Samui, who didn't come here, but another occasion went to Penang and didn't come here. But both times wished we'd come back here, because we'd met people, we got to know people, and we felt at home here.
For a vacation, it's easy.
Yeah.
It's very comfortable. It's simple.
Yeah. And although we were aware of this, we'd seen, Jill used to love her food, used to love going in markets, and, felt for these dogs she saw everywhere. But obviously in hotels, it kept away from them. But at this particular time, we went to a hotel where the hotel we were staying at on that occasion. They had like a cocktail party in the evening for guests and return guests and things. And we met this, she's actually a British lady living in Switzerland who'd been staying a couple of months at this hotel. And she befriended this dog. And he looked in lovely condition. He had a wound on his head, we noticed.
Do you remember the name of the dog?
We christened it Naga, which is a Thai dragon-type creature. But I've forgotten what she called it. But she was leaving the next day after this party, and asked, would you just keep an eye out on the dog for us and check it was all right? She'd had it to the vet. She used to get it washed and all the rest of it. Said, well, we're leaving in a couple of days, but we'll maybe pass it on to someone else just to look after. Think anything about it. And the GM of the hotel was there and said, it's a lovely dog, isn't it? Blah, blah, blah. And at the end of the night, we sort of, come on then, followed us. We didn't allow him in the room or anything like that. But we were on a ground floor room with a little patio outside and leading onto the grass on the beach, and he slept there. Next morning, he wasn't there, didn't think anything about it, but I did go looking for it, couldn't find him. And I asked the the GM, he'd gone off to Bangkok for meetings or something. Didn't see him again. Asked the assistant manager if he said, "Oh yes," he said, "you probably appreciate we don't really want dogs living on the premises. So, with what we've done though, we've taken it to a nice temple, and the dog will be cared for there and whatever." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "You tell me the name of the temple. I'll go out and visit it, maybe make a donation and just see the dog." "Oh, I don't know, but I'll go find out." And came back to me. We didn't take it to a temple. Actually, we took it to just the north there, near the bridge. There's restaurants along the beach.
North of Macau.
North of Macau, there used to still one or two. There used to be a lot of restaurants just before you got to the bridge on the left-hand side, and we've left it there. But it'll be plenty of food. So I said to Gill, "Look, I'm going to rent a car, go up and see if I can find this dog."
Bit of a hike. You're talking 30 minutes.
Because we'd actually met somebody who was feeding dogs at temples, an American girl.
Yeah.
And maybe I could talk to her. Maybe she could get it to a vet. And even think, can we get this dog to England or whatever? So we got, we felt about the dog. Hired a car, went up there. Obviously, I didn't speak Thai, but showed a dog, and I knew a bit enough to know nobody had seen a dog. So this was by this time, it was our last but one day. So we asked the general manager to put a word out, asked Eve to put word out. If the dog tried to make its way back, let us know, and we would do, pay for any vet treatment. That following morning, the day we were leaving, Gill had befriended, got to know you have these fruit stalls on the beach in front of the hotel, and this girl, she was a Muslim girl.
It's pretty much right. You're right on Bang Tao Beach, right?
Yeah, we were on Bang Tao Beach. And this girl told us that she gets there early in the morning to set the stall up. She'd seen that morning the dog was outside our room. Some security guards had got it, taken the dog, clubbed it to death, and put it in a sack and taken it away. So you can imagine about that. We felt almost sort of not responsible.
6 years.
And we contacted the hotel and complained, but what can you do? And I'm not saying the hotel manager ordered the dog to be destroyed.
No.
He probably just passed it on to his assistant.
Said, "Hey, can you remove the dog?"
Get rid of it. Passed it on to them down the line to garden staff or whatever.
Yeah.
And for them, rid of the dog.
And keep in mind, this is 1996 in Phuket.
This is not. No, this would now be 90, probably 98, 99, because we'd be coming back to 2 or 3
so
years.
also then it's a different time back then.
Well, it's a different time, but interesting enough, I have a meeting tomorrow at a hotel, similar situation.
Okay.
And
things haven't completely changed.
So things haven't changed completely, and certainly hotels will similar. And although we're going to keep this, hopefully resolve this in an amicable way.
Yes.
Because, what has happened is actually illegal now in terms of the animal welfare law. So you cannot just grab dogs, shove them in sacks and then dump them in the sea or put them in mangrove swamps or whatever. That's illegal.
Yeah.
And, in terms of that sort of thing going on. So you say it doesn't go on anymore, sadly.
Yeah, I'm very surprised to hear that.
It can still go on. We do obviously get things like that, so it does go on.
So at this point, you've found this horrifying information out, and your trip's coming to an end nearly, and you're about to head back home.
Yeah, we returned home. Obviously, my Gill at the time was.
Is this kind of what sparked?
That's what idea? Really I think sparked it off.
Yeah,
we'd already had in mind to move. When I retired, I planned to take early retirement. Actually, when I got to 55, we would retire. It ended up being earlier than that. I'll come into a minute.
So this time you're about 50 years old.
Yeah. And then some friends of ours who live here, actually, groups of friends, one lived here permanently, the other didn't. But he was an airline pilot, and his wife was Thai. Had actually bought, they were selling land plots at Laguna. And so they said, "Why don't you buy one?" We thought, well, at that time it was cheap,
Yeah.
So we looked at potential, well, even if it's just as an investment, whether we decide not to or not, it's probably not a bad investment. So.
And the Thai baht was not that great. That was probably, well, I know US dollar probably back then was a 40-1 or something.
Well, it's funny enough, the year we came to Thailand first, it was the Asian crash year.
Yeah.
We were getting 90 odd bars at that time.
Yeah.
It didn't last for long, but for many years it was 70s and gradually
for
to 60s.
the pound.
Yeah, sorry, just after we came. The first time we came, we got married, it was 30 odd to the pound. So it was still, at that point it was strong, but things were a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
But at that point, the baht was very good. It made sense.
Made sense to buy the land. And
we did.
And then how long did you guys sit on this land before you decided to build and move here?
Well, it then came up that the company I worked for was actually, like many companies, was downsizing in Europe and building a new plant in China, and was looking for people to take voluntary redundancy and early retirement.
And you were a chemical engineer?
Yeah. The company I worked for, though, made lithographic printing plates.
Okay.
But they made their own coat. The coating that goes on the plates is very much specialised chemicals. And I worked on as a basically manager there. Yep. So it worked out that what they were offering would have meant I would have, if I'd have stayed on, I could have stayed on until I was 55, would have been crazy. It just didn't make sense of what they were offering. So, I put my hand up at 51.
They give you the severance package. And
we then took the decision to move up, push ahead and move to Thailand. So we got a builder, came over on holiday in 2003.
Right?
Well, in 2001 we hired a builder. We then designed the house and everything over the internet generally.
Yep.
Built the house and whatever. It took about a year to build. I came over here early 2003 just to make sure everything was finished off, as you have to be here. Gill took care of selling our house in England, and we moved lock, stock and barrel here in, July 2000, or June, was it 2003.
Now, you weren't looking to come over here and, let's say, golf and lay on the beach and soak in the sun. You had
No, we did plan. I mean, part of the property we got has got free golf membership. We thought we could take up golf. Scuba diving was actually my passion. I used to spend half my holidays scuba diving, and I thought, great. Suffice to say, neither has ever swung a golf club in action, and I went scuba diving for half a day once, about a year after
it's not easy to scuba dive in Phuket. There's nowhere to go. I mean, you can go out to PP, you can go to Ratchia, but it's a long day.
Yeah, but that's what I used to on holiday, yeah. But I mean, it's a case of, literally, we decided to try and do something, and I looked into what was happening already. There was an Australian vet who'd moved here and spent 2 years here, set up a project sterilising dogs at temples. The name of the project now has gone out of my brain. I say my memory's going terrible. It'll come to me. But she was finishing at the time. She'd just come over 2 years. She was having to go back to work in Hong Kong. There were a couple of other groups here, but they were basically doing feeding dogs, and there was one group who would allow their volunteers to get, I think it was 5 dogs a month sterilised at a local
and it was
local vets.
It wasn't commercialized at this point. It's just kind of a very small operation.
It was just basically operation. So we looked in terms of, could we help somebody? There was a Dutch lady who'd just moved here, again, just retired. She'd been living in Bangkok, and she actually came with the name of Soi Dog. And she, though, had different views to everybody else. She believed the answer to it was large-scale sterilisation. Not that she was in a position to do that at that time. But I agreed with what she was doing and decided to join forces with her. Gill had actually been doing teaching course in England to qualify for teaching English language to foreigners, because she felt maybe she would like to teach underprivileged children English as a sort of something to do. But that turned very difficult to do, and there was a lot of people involved in helping underprivileged children and whatever on the island, and really you needed work permits and this sort of thing to be able to do that.
Yeah, the whole process to set up, isn't
and,
that so
I was on we were retired on a retirement visa.
Yeah.
So I joined forces with Margot, and Gill joined shortly afterwards. And that's how Soi Dog started. And then, I mean, it was very low key. And
what was the operation like at that? I read you guys, now is this before you've moved to Phuket town and set up a facility?
Yeah. There was just literally, we were using local vets, but also the Australian vet had left us, gave us her equipment. She had a truck and whatever, gave us her equipment, medical equipment. And she had a lot of overseas vets right into offering their services, and nurses volunteering. So what we did, we sort of started this full time really in about October of 2003, and we would get vets over from different countries, states, Canada. In fact, one of the biggest clinics we had, funny enough, was Canadian vets.
Which city was that in?
They were from, I think they were coming from Toronto.
Toronto.
But we had a big clinic at a school in Bandon, and there were also nurses there. That was in sort of 2004.
And at this point, it's just volunteers?
It's volunteers, but then in the meantime, we would take dogs ourselves. I mean, first time I met Margot, I helped her at Lamsing Beach down the road from here.
Yep.
And literally, I got a few more people involved, and we're carrying these dogs up. So she was then taking them to a vet, and we took them to local vets who would do it for low cost. There weren't that many vets on the island then, but we had 2 or 3 that would do it for us. And
then how were you funding it at that point?
Basically, at that point, very little funding coming in. Most of it was, a lot of it was at our own expense. I mean, Soi Dog took, I mean, people think, oh, you know, how much do I earn and this sort of thing. I'm reliant on I have a good pension.
Yep.
But most of my savings over the years have gone on Soi Dog, and I've never received a penny in payment from Soi Dog. We were always volunteers and never received anything. And same with Margot. I mean, today we employ over 300 staff, both in Phuket and Bangkok and different areas. But that's going back to the beginning. It was entirely volunteers. If you say, I mean, what happened then, obviously, continue the story. So we were working like that for the first year. And in the first year, well, the first 15 months, because I started keeping records from day one, we managed to sterilise just over 1,000 in the whole year dogs on Phuket. Now, if you take that in context of now, it's gradually increased, but I'll go into the context now.
Yep.
This year, the aim was to sterilise 150,000 this year, and we sterilise, well, you know, far more in a week than we did in a year.
Were you getting local recognition from the Thai government of noticing of what you guys were doing, and this was all?
No.
Okay. And
no, generally, I mean, over the time, I think generally we also did work with tried to work the local livestock department, but more often than not, we worked with people like Phuket, the vet who was a vet working for the Phuket town, Obotor, doing local sterilisation. There was a little bit going on, and so we would work with him as well and take dogs to him. When he was working in particular streets, he would set up his table and we would catch dogs for him. Quite often what would happen, the local livestock, if they were doing anything, would just set up a table and wait for people to come. They weren't actively catching dogs. And we'd already taught ourselves how to dart dogs. You asked earlier.
Yeah.
You know, we have to catch dogs either with nets, but if you can't, more often not, you can't get near enough to do that.
The feral dogs
dart.
They're gone in a second into the bush. And
so we blow dart them with anaesthetic. They don't go down immediately, but you have to watch them and then watch them going down, because often it takes a few minutes, but then they go and then you can pick them up safely. But, you know, so that's how you do it. And so we were doing that.
And this probably goes into the story of with Gill, and she was darting in the buffalo fields, correct? This
goes into Gill and then to what happened then when, of course, later in 2004. But it was a clinic this clinic I described, actually, with the Canadian vets at Bandon. It was a big clinic, so Gill and I and Margot were all out catching dogs for this clinic because we needed plenty of dogs. We were encouraging the children as well with the families. They were bringing dogs in. I've actually a friend of mine who filmed children with the parents bringing their own dogs to the clinic. So you did all sorts of, we had big posters up educating the children. That's why we like to do them at schools. So you're educating at the same time and encouraging the children to bring dogs in. But we were out in the village, obviously in surrounding area, catching dogs. And Joel went off also with, funny enough, an American guy he liked catching dogs. He saw himself as a bit of a Rambo type character. I think he saw himself as, whatever.
Fair enough.
Used to come dressed for the part.
Yeah.
Whatever, I won't say any more than that. But it was a bit funny. So Joel went off with him, and they went off actually just north of Bandon, between Bandon and Talang. There's now houses there, but there was
behind. I used to live in Bandung, so that it's that river they keep fixing up in the back road. Do you know the one I'm talking about? And then there's just like farm fields way back there.
Well, that's right. I mean, this was the road between Bandon and Talang, and before you get to that big bend, there still actually is a building merchant there, and that's where she went. But then all that side is now a housing development and shops and everything else. That was just what I call Buffalo Field. I mean, it's basically old rice paddies, these places, where they know, and but they now had water buffalo.
Little pig farms out there. And
And this, of course, was late October, so it was peak of the rainy season. It was flooded, as it is. Gill knew this dog that she wanted. She'd seen it. It was a big mama dog. It had several litters, and it lived at the builder's merchant. And if you know at builder's merchants, you'll see these piles of drain pipes for sale and whatever. This dog used to sleep inside one, so she snuck up from behind it, bang, and its bum, perfect shot. Great, got it. Of course, the dog, the first thing, boom, out it jumps, runs over into this water buffalo field, which is flooded. I mean, not talking, but about that deep.
Yeah, 2 feet deep.
Yeah, whatever. Well, maybe not even that, maybe a foot to 18, but big enough, deep enough, so that a dog goes down, it's going to drown.
Yeah.
So Gill, obviously, she shouted to, I'll call him Sam, it's not his...
Rambo.
Yeah, Rambo, He was dressed in his clean white socks and pumps and think, no way I'm going in there. So Gill, who had actually... she cracked her ribs, so she'd had a fall, and so she was a bit weak anyway, and I think her resistance was probably a bit down. She hadn't been feeling...
The immune system is low
immune
at this
system's
point.
a bit low.
Yeah.
So she went off after this dog, running after it, and got there. She went fair way in before it went down, and then it goes down, and obviously at that point down. So she got it, and it was quite a heavy dog. She got hold of it, got its head over the water, and literally dragged it back to the road and got it into the truck. Then they got it back to the clinic, and it was sort of a bit of a joke. Jill was sort of covered in mud and just got some of this mud and threw it at Sam, called, it's not his name, put that out straight away, Rambo, what are we going to call him?
Yeah.
And it was sort of a bit of a joke, and everybody laughed about it. It was a couple of days later, end of September, it was, because my birthday, which is early October, Jill had been preparing, had invited a lot of friends round to the house, and had been preparing it and everything. And Jill loved big hobby was cooking and create, catering for people. She enjoyed doing it. But that night it was 2 or 3 days later, she said, John, I'm going to have to go to bed. I just feel really ill. So people came to the party, and Jill wasn't there, up in bed, which is so unlikely. And when I went to see her, she was, she didn't know what was wrong. She said she got a really bad flu attack or whatever.
But something's off. It's not
wrong.
Yeah.
The following, but that night the following morning she was in a lot of pain in her legs. And I called a friend, and we got her in the car, literally.
And how many days after
this
from
is
this?
Probably 4 or 5 days after. We got her down to the casualty at Bangkok, Phuket. They got on a trolley, took one look at her, and we literally watched her legs turn from flesh colour to grey. And they whipped her up to intensive care. Jill doesn't remember anything after that for about a month. And I was going on, and the doctors told me that this was on first night, that at the time, that basically she got the septicemia, which is where, the blood rushes to save your vital organs, and you get gangrene in your extremities, your arms and legs.
So what she had, like a parasite? Or?
It was a rare form. They never had discovered the actual bacteria. They said it was a rare gram-negative soil-based bacteria. They had antibiotics flown in from Australia and everything because, but the reason they started pumping her full of antibiotics almost immediately, and obviously then identifying it became harder. Probably if they'd taken blood, they may have, but whatever, it was
things were happening so fast anyways.
And they told me literally her chances of survival were slim, and if she did survive, she'd probably lose her arms and her legs. So, imagine I'm in. And then it was actually James Batt, who was at that time the CEO of All Lagoon, that contacted me and said, John, they said he's on the board of Bangkok Phuket. It's a great hospital. It's a great local hospital, but you need to get her out of to a major with this sort of situation. So luckily it was insured, contacted the insurance company, and he suggested Singapore. They ideally wanted to send to Bumrungrad in Bangkok.
Yeah.
So James Bat said, yeah, fine. So after it was about 4 days on. At that time, they said the chances of survival are going down. Heart had stopped them. They'd have to bring her back a few times.
She's in an induced coma at this point.
Yeah, she's in induced coma. I mean, she's on every machine you can imagine, from, liver, kidney machines, obviously fully incubated, everything. And so, James said, great. So they literally sent a plane down with like a mobile ICU unit, basically, as they do with a former Thai Air Force doctor on board. And
Doctors Without Borders airplane.
Yeah, they come on the plane. They come down with their own amazing technology. I mean, it's like almost identical machines that were in the ward.
But it's right in the plane.
Miniature.
Yeah.
And literally, they strap these things. They have the nurses there with them strapped to themselves, changing all the plugs. It's torrential rain that night. They had to wait for the police to give the all clear, that the road was clear, so they could get up there quickly, because they didn't want to be stuck in traffic with these things on.
Yeah.
Got her up there, straight through into the airport, onto the plane, where it's like a purpose-built ICU unit, flying ICU unit in effect. It flies all over Asia, taking patients here to Bumrungrad. And again, unplugged everything into it. Jill used to complain afterwards. The only time she's ever been in a private jet, no champagne, and she knew nothing about it. But there you go. So I was sat with her, get there, straight into the hospital. And again, different situation there. I mean, they work it different ways. They have like a general practitioner. He was actually a Sikh who was in charge of the case. But they bring in all these specialists. I think she had about 12 specialists, you name it, blood, everything, surgeon, and they have conferences. Yeah. And literally within, what worried me, I think, with Bangkok Phuket, I think it was the night before, there was literally no doctor on duty. The doctor in her case had to go off to another hospital. And I was shocked. Well, what happens? Don't worry, if we need him, we can call him. Whereas at Bumrungrad, literally in that first night, there were, you name it, one doctor after the other. And this is the middle of the night, 2 or 3 in the morning. By this time, specialists coming in and whatever. But she was in a coma at that point. Literally, and I mean, her legs were black, her arms were huge patches of blood.
This is because the blood is flowing again to
it's going to basically, I think the clots, it die, or basically in the small veins as the blood goes. This is what my understanding.
Yeah.
A doctor could tell exactly what had happened, but I just know the basics of it. So that's what happened. And but fortunately, they were able to save her life. They couldn't save her legs, but they did manage to save her arms. I mean, she has permanent scarring on it. I mean, bad scarring did affect.
But she had mobility.
But she had decent mobility in it. But then the second sort of twist of the story is that she was determined to get out of hospital for Christmas. This was early October, and so she insisted she was leaving, and more or less made arrangements for her to be. Again, she was taken from there to
the hospital,
and then to back to Phuket. Not in a private plane, but
she was able to be transferred, and then
she was transferred,
stabilized over.
Yeah, she was stabilized. She was able to go enough to travel on. I mean, they took her ambulance to the plane, and the insurance company paid for business class seats, and she had a nurse with her, just whatever. But everything was fine.
Yeah.
And then she had all piles of whatever. And the plan was for her to go back. She was in a wheelchair, obviously. In the last sort of week, she'd been working with a prosthetic company in Bangkok who were coming in to look at her. But they have to wait until they have to bandage the legs, the taper, to get it before they can do a final fitting. So she came out, I think it was December the 23rd. She was determined to cook Christmas. She always cooked Christmas dinner for friends, particularly our single male friends who would, she cooked for them to come round. So they had a Christmas dinner, basically. And we had 11, 12 people there, I think, which she's on kneeling on a wheelchair and around and all the rest of it. then, of course, what happened December the 26th? The tsunami.
Yes.
So normally on Boxing Day, we went to a local bar. The landlord there used to put on a thing for his regulars.
Now, meanwhile, you're in Laguna, so you probably Boat Avenue doesn't even exist at this point.
No, Boat Avenue didn't. The pub that we went to is all gone now and changed, but it's nevertheless, that's what happened at the time. And we got a call actually from our maid. We used to come and work in the house. She didn't live in, but she used to come and work a few days a week, part-time cleaning. She called us and said, "John, are you okay?" We said, "Yeah, why? What's up?" "Oh, there's been a big wave," as she put it. And, I said, "Really?" I mean, we were sat on our balcony and we could see people playing golf. The gardeners in the golf course still working, everything normal. I said, "No, everything's fine here,"
But it never reached that area? It never came up onto the land?
Oh, no, nowhere near there, no.
Okay.
We were sort of
but it's
about a kilometre back by...
Yeah, you're still quite close to the ocean there.
Yeah, and I mean, people did feel it. I mean, we never remember feeling it, but there you go, when it happened, the earthquake. But we didn't at that point. So I thought, no, I haven't heard anything. We thought, well, on our way to the bar, we'll go and drive down to could you see if we can see anything? We went by a very popular restaurant that's, again, no longer exists now, but did at the time. There used to be lots of restaurants down there. This was quite a famous one. And there was some damage. They were cleaning up, putting the tables back, and they had some fish tank at the front with broken glass, but nothing much. So we heard it must have been a high wave, that, end of story. And it was only, people, when we got to the pub, nobody had mentioned tsunami at this stage.
Yeah, nobody probably knows the word either.
This is now sort of early afternoon. It was like a lunchtime thing. And then we got a call from Margot, who's a Dutch lady. She said, "John, Leonie's been killed by this. What? That was it. Leonie was Jill's best friend, and she was a volunteer, quite well known on the island, lived in Rawai.
And that was helping you kind of at the beginning.
She used to help us. She used to She was a volunteer, and we'd have mobile clinics down there. And she'd gone to the beach where they had a little bungalow they used to rent out.
Which, Rawai or?
Yeah, this was Nui Beach.
Yeah.
Near Naiha.
Yeah.
And she'd gone down and she got literally the house, after the house was demolished when we went down for the funeral and everything, but she got hit by the second wave and was killed with 2 waves.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was it. And then we turned on the TV and saw what was happening, obviously. And volunteers we had were staying down in Bang Tao. Lots of them used to stay. We had a volunteer vet there staying at these gone now Bang Tao Lagoon bungalows, and they would been on the roof and things of bungalows. We had no idea for sort of about 3 or 4
southern
hours.
part of Bang Tao. I heard the most of the bungalows they got flooded up to the second floors.
Yeah, and so they were on the roof, whatever, and they had to go. So because we got him and he came, stayed with us, and one thing and another, and then obviously tuning into the news to find out what was happening, and then we found out that that obviously we realised that Phuket had been hit, but that Phang Nga was the really bad place.
Up by Khao Lak.
Yeah, and things seemed to be more or less went down the next side. I mean, I saw, you can see the damage at Kamala, for example, was severe. A lot of people got killed in Kamala. But then we were told that the issue with Khao Lak was horrendous and they needed help there. So I drove up there with some other people, and Gill came as well. Gill dropped off at the hospital in Takwa Pa but she could at least speak with people and counsel people. I mean, she knew what it was. She didn't know what it was to live through tsunami, but she knew what it was to lose her legs. And a lot of people had lost limbs, and a lot of people were in desperate states. So she did that, and we were literally in the centre.
She's dealing with a lot of the Farangs, or
foreigners basically, tourists. Yeah. So she was talking to tourists in the hospital.
And what hospital was this?
This was the main hospital in Takwa Pa. It's actually the same hospital that was featured in that film.
This is pretty much up. Then that's
the northern part of
Khao Lak.
North of Khao Lak. Yeah. We were in the centre of Khao Lak. I mean, I took her on there.
This is where the boat came right up.
Where the boat came up, and there was like this big open, just totally flattened. I mean, and the boat was behind us.
Yeah.
And in the centre of this clear area, there were literally hundreds of bodies stacked up.
Yeah.
And so what we ended up doing, we formed a team, and we would be wrapping bodies. So what what you did was, there was no body bags at this time. In fact, I got a call from Alistair, who was then the editor of the Phuket Gazette, Alistair Forbes, and what's needed up there. And I said, well, to be honest, what would really be big help is body bags, because this is a very slow, laborious process. We have big rolls of plastic and then rolls of muslin. And so what you did, you had to literally lift a body off the pile, cut out a piece of plastic, lift a body off the pile, and then put a piece of muslin on top of that. Body off the pile onto it. Quite often this sounds pretty horrible, but you'd have to break arms and legs that were stuck up all over the pipe because of rigor mortis had set in. And then...
And the heat and the stench.
Yeah, the stench was just... I mean, yeah, we used to use tiger balm. You used to put tiger balm on your nose.
Because this happened midday, so the heat's come out. I mean, it's...
Yeah, I mean, literally, to be honest, the smell, stayed with you. You'd wear rubber gloves, but the smell, you could smell it on yourself even when you've gone home. And so we would be doing this, and this was a whole group of us from Phuket, and we were doing this, and then it was, you talk about getting hardened to stuff. Yeah, you do, but because it was, everything from huge. Some very big men, Western men, must have weighed 20 odd stone. Bloated as well, and insides hanging out, and all this carry on, and you lift them up, and the skin literally is peeling off them as you're lifting them, And
how many people were you working with at the time?
Well, in our group, there'll be 6 of us to a group generally, or 4, and then but sometimes with a guy like that, you need a hand because they're heavy to lift for pile onto another thing. Then you would Thai girl volunteer would be cutting some hair off, putting a number on it, and then we would be wrapping the body, literally tying it up, and then carrying that then to another pile underneath a load of tents, which were there being piled up, and then they were piled on there, and marked up, were numbered.
And they were identified, a lot of these people, or was that very difficult?
This time all we were doing this was ready for DNA testing.
Yeah.
That's why they were taking hair. Bear in mind, we were we're also at that time involved also. A guy who was Heath, friend of ours, he was the head groundsman at the resort. Sorry, the Lock Palm, the big golf course.
Blue Canyon.
Blue Canyon. Yeah. So he was the head groundsman there, and they took up pumps and whatever. They're pumps, big pumps, because one of the hotels that we visited, we went to see with him, see if we could help him. But there was it only just opened. It literally only just opened that season. It had the biggest...
The Blue Canyon just opened?
No, the hotel in Khao.
Maybe
and it was just north of the centre.
Not the Marriott, not up that far.
No, I've forgotten the name. It's now open again with a different name, and it's a big hotel group at the time, but it was more or less destroyed.
Yeah.
It was famous for having the biggest pool in, I think, Asia, swimming pool, open swimming. They'd opened this, and literally a lot of it was surrounded by bungalows, and it was, literally it was desolation, and you could see people. There was a Russian lady just looking for signs of her family, and again there were bodies that had been swept underneath these. I think some of them probably never were recovered because the flooding and everything. What happened? It got flooded underneath, but pumps there were there to try and pump all this water.
Flooded underneath the pool.
Get underneath underneath literally the foundations.
Yeah.
And this all flooded, and everything else. And you could see all this like Christmas wrapping paper and things around. It was, horrible stuff. But so we're doing what we could to help generally. We did this, we were up and down there for about 3 days. In the meantime, Margot was, Herbert, she had been getting dogs from islands, and we were getting inundated with people from vets, overseas vets and whatever, to see if they could help. And what we did at this point, after about 3 days, you had the first, I would say, proper relief teams coming in, who came in from Taiwan, I think it was, and Israel and places like that. Israel was sending body bags over, and you had proper teams coming in from overseas.
Yeah.
Left it to them, and I went back to the dogs. Other people like Ian, who's been organising it.
Were there major deaths with animals as well that you had to deal with?
Well, this is the strange thing. I mean, if you look at, if you say in terms of, he was lucky in a way it was a Sunday, because if you went to Camelot, the temple there at Camelot, which is right near the front of the beach, was heavily damaged. There's a school there. That school would have had hundreds of children in it. It was closed being Sunday. It would have been probably a huge death toll amongst local children. A few monks were killed. There are a lot of stories regarding animals. A lot of the dogs went up the steps on the bell tower before the tsunami hit. There are stories of people seeing snakes, not just going up, heading away.
Before it hit.
Yeah, before it hit. There's obviously the well-known story in Laguna of the baby elephant that picked up this Swedish girl, she's Danish, and carried her off away from the sea. And, that's sort of quite a famous story. And the guy there wanted the elephant afterwards, and blah, blah, blah. So there's stories about animals. People talk about animals having a sixth sense. There's certainly evidence to suggest that, even just from that there is something in it. Whether they just, they felt this, obviously the earthquake or whatever, or felt something that prompted them to move away. Same as was a girl, who had been studying about earthquakes or about tsunamis at school. And she recognised the signs, I think, down in the Laguna area, and sort of shouted to people, there was a tsunami. Because when, obviously, as you know, the sea gets drawn out. Yeah. It's like a normal wave, sea's coming out and in. And the more it goes out, the bigger the wave. So you've got these pictures of fish and everything. And sadly, people were running out onto the beach to collect fish because there were all these fish flapping about.
And they have no idea what's about. Yeah.
No, and they all got killed, obviously, as the wave came in, particularly in Cowlight. So that was sort of, but unless you have any specific more on that, I would say something good comes out of something bad.
And what came good out of that?
In terms of Soi Dog, right, in that it put Soi Dog more on the map, because people obviously wanted, we didn't have time. We were working round the clock. Jill was still in a wheelchair at the time, but she was managing mobile teams. I was managing another one down in Caron. We had so many vets. We had over 50 vets, plus nurses coming from all over the place, even from Japan and from Europe and from America and Canada, over that period of time, wanting to volunteer the services. So we were inundated. And we got people inquiring, how can I help? Can I donate? So obviously people were donating as well. So the first time that happened, we didn't raise a lot of funds, by any means through the tsunami. But a lot of big organisations did. As you're probably aware, one of the things they do is...
like the Red Cross and...
Yeah, but also animal welfare organisations, the big ones. Like, it no longer exists, so I couldn't name them, but it was called WISPO, World Society for Protection of Animals, who we got a grant from. They told us they raised more money from the tsunami, huge amounts of money than it did, but it also affected their other programmes. They raised vast sums. And they had to, because a lot of it was restricted, had to give some of it back, to directly. So they set up what they called a Tsunami Recovery Fund. And they asked local foundations across the Indian Ocean if they would become member societies. That's how it was formed at those days, no longer exists in that way, to become members, and they would give us a grant. So we became a member society, and they gave us what they called a Tsunami Recovery Grant, which was, as I recall, 3 million baht at the time or something. And the idea, it was would be over 2 years. I think it was a bit more than that.
But that was enough to kind of kickstart this foundation.
At that time, that was enough. Scale. Yeah, consider our budget now is well over 20 million baht a month.
Yeah.
It seemed little, but at that time it was enough. We were able to employ 2 vets full-time, and we were able to employ 2 teams of 2 dog catchers, sorry. And we rented this building, this disused restaurant in Phuket Town. Yeah. It's sort of on the way to Koh Sireh, not far from where you go over, where the harbour is, etc. And it was a big building, but so we set up a clinic there. That immediately is where dogs started being dumped as well, because a lot, again, a bit like now with COVID, people left and they were dumping
Would
dogs.
they just show up and bring dogs to the doorstep and
No, generally what happened was that dogs, we were picking dogs up in need, but people, we put a fence round, obviously, to ensure, but the dogs were kept inside. It was a huge building. But people were throwing them over the fence and whatever. In fact, one died from a broken back, where people were trying to, jump dogs, thinking, we take care of them. So we ended up anyway, at the end of the day, we were there for many months doing this. But we ended up with over 100 dogs. And we needed at that time to, in terms of, that we can't keep 100 dogs here, what are we going to do? Now, Margaret at that time, sadly, she was still heavily involved, but she became quite ill. I think probably partly also with the strain of what had been of the previous year, which had been very heavy, and needed to step down. So she actually left Phuket in due course. So that led sort of Gill and I to sort of carry on. And we had, by that time, being already formed a Thai foundation with a Thai board, predominantly Thai board.
But you're registered with the Thai, the Thai government.
Yes,
you have your international memberships. I'm assuming.
Well,
with
by then we are fundraising.
Yeah.
At that point, I'm doing the fundraising. I'm sort of internationally starting to raise funds through, emails, Facebook, and whatever. Yeah. So I'm starting to, it's starting to become better organised. Still very small, but we are starting. And I'm applying for grants from large foundations and so forth to expand the work we're doing. That's how it started.
And how quickly did it expand from your location in Phuket town to, let's say, what was your next major milestone?
Well, what we moved then is that in 2000, this was so basically, bear in mind, we're talking now, obviously, we've gone into 2006.
Okay.
So after the tsunami, this was all in 2005, and then we're in this building into 2006. This is when we had to move, and Jill and I, we contacted through contacts the Department of Livestock, who also in approximately 2003, had built this, what is now known as the Phuket Dog Shelter. I think they call it Dog Pound or whatever.
And where's that located?
That's on the main highway before you get to the airport turn-off, so after Talang.
Yep.
But before you get to the PTT station on a bend, it's
and
the
this still exists.
It still exists. It's known as the Dog Pound.
Okay.
We had raised funds to, again, as a fundraising effort to outside a whisper and proposed to them that we go in there. The place was a mess. They'd built it, but they hadn't built it properly.
There's no infrastructure. There's just...
Well, they'd built these sort of huge two big runs and things. The fences were inadequate. They'd built gaps between the wall and the fence where smaller dogs could get under. The higher fences, the bigger dogs could just hop over at will. It was right on a main road, so a lot of dogs would run out and get splattered on the road. So it was totally unsafe, not only for the dogs, but for passing motorcycles and cars, etc. It was a mess. They'd also they'd not put any drainage in. So where this walled, it became like a bund, if you know what a bund is, almost like, so it filled with water. And so the dogs ended up being squashed in the top because it was on a slope and a small little bit of land when it was raining. It was a mess. There'd no clinic, there'd no way to treat dogs. It was literally a couple of old ladies were feeding the dogs. But now
it's a pound in which people are dropping off their dogs, or they're being called upon to pick up dogs in that sense?
They particularly don't, but I'll come to that in a minute.
Yeah.
But so we basically raised funds and suggested to them we move in there. We could help. We needed one of the runs for our dogs. And so one of the bigger dogs, which we would then take responsibility for and build and whatever. But we'd build a clinic for them. We'd put drainage in. We'd put the proper fencing round to secure it so it became safe, and did all that. It cost, that cost us about 3 million baht at the time, going back in those days. So we did that. It took several months to do and whatever. We'd moved in. Shortly afterwards, they started talking about, it was inappropriate for an NGO to be running a government facility.
Now we're getting into 2007?
Yeah.
2007, okay.
And so it was over that period of time, and we asked for time, but they said we needed to find somewhere else. So in effect, we'd done what they wanted, but they wanted us out. And I think they didn't like us interfering. We'd actually set up an education centre as well. We're already, Gill and one of our Thai volunteers, were already bringing children here to there to teach them. We'd set up like an agility with other volunteers, an agility centre. So we're already training dogs and getting dogs, starting to get a few dogs adopted and this sort of thing.
But this place, was it all Thai run, or were there Farang?
It was all Thai run. But I mean, we were, we were there every day. I mean, don't get me wrong. But I mean, there were foreign volunteers coming in. A lot of foreign volunteers were coming and helping at that time. More
from around internationally or from the island?
From the island, and also from volunteers from Phang Nga come in, and also visiting. You started to get this visiting thing.
The like kind of tourism volunteer.
Yeah.
Right?
So it started at that point. So we get first ones were coming and visiting, low in numbers but coming. So it was happening, and Soi Dog name was starting to grow. So. But to cut a long story short, and again, I get my dates mixed up.
Well, this is kind of the transition, because I'm assuming it's the Mai Khao area. So this is where you're transitioning from this kind of dog shelter location to your current.
We have to move out.
Yeah.
So our president, who at that time was Dr. Sushan, a local vet, also owned land in Mai Khao. He knew some land that the owner was trying to rent, and he said it would be suitable. So we went to look at it, and we thought, it was. We were in a dire straits. There was one actually incomplete house there, nearly complete, an old cattle shed, and that was it. Our little block of like 4 rooms.
So are we talking 1 rai, 2 rai?
Oh, with several rai.
Okay.
And there was also a pond, a lake in the middle of it, included in that. I think that original land was about 7 rai. So he offered to rent us. So we rented it from him. We got builders in, and we built initial dog runs quite in a hurry, and we built proper runs in. And so then we moved the dogs in there. So we were renting that land initially. Again, to cut a long story, over the years, it's gradually, I mean, the growth of, if you imagine a graph, Soi Dog has been like that. And then in the last sort of 5 years, it's very steep.
In terms of purchasing, in terms of growing your land, like what have you gone from?
Everything.
You've gone from 7 rai to where are you today?
Well, now we're about, what are we now? It's more than double. I think it's probably about, as of the latest land bought, it's probably 15 or something like that. But I mean, what we did first, obviously, we actually had a campaign to buy that initial land. We bought half of it. Yeah. Then we bought the other half.
Okay, so you own it now.
Oh, yeah, we own all the land. We own that land. And then we negotiated with the same guy who owned next land to buy that. He got a bit, let's say, he wanted too much money for the last bit, but then we bought land behind, which adjoins it this year. So because we've had to buy more for expansion. So although it's not cheap land in Phuket anywhere, and it's not. It's expensive in people.
And prices going up, but at least you're out in Mai Khao where it's a little less expensive.
It's a little less, but it's still expensive.
It's still expensive.
People said, and we could have bought land in the middle of nowhere somewhere else in Thailand very cheaply, but you still got to get your staff there. Yeah. You still got to have visitors. You've got to have there, and you've got to have your catchment area, and that was our catchment area.
And it needs to be a little bit attractive for the volunteers as well. They don't want to be in the middle of the jungle.
Volunteers became important. Yeah. I mean, in terms of volunteers, I mean, we get. Now, of course, it's stopped. I mean, we've got local volunteers, from countries. People, in fact, we've had quite a lot of Russians coming who they love, should put it out on their Russian sort of Facebook pages, and we've had quite a few Russians regularly coming up as they come here. We've also got, we've started to get a few now, people from overseas who've come on the sandbox. Still small numbers, same as tourist numbers are small.
And they came on the sandbox specifically to maybe do Thailand volunteer tourism to help you guys out.
Well, we would have probably normally before COVID, we would probably have, certainly in high season, 40 or 50 volunteers any week, any day, any of the week. So, and they would be there walking dogs and whatever. But the bonus really also is they became also on the way back, they could be flight volunteers for taking dogs to new homes that had become adopted. They also became a lot of them adopters themselves, because you imagine, particularly if you're spending, most of them are spending at least 2 weeks, some would end up spending 2 years, or more, but they would get attached to particular dogs and they want to adopt that dog themselves. So that increased adoptions. We focus a lot on local adoptions now, but generally speaking, it's sad in a way. I mean, the old king of Thailand, the late king, bless him, he in his book on his own street dog, exhorts Thai people to adopt dogs, not to buy expensive pedigree breeds. But
did you have a relationship with him at any point?
No, not directly, no. I mean, the current king has donated food to us as sort of as it's symbolic. We've had visitors come round, but there have been no personal contact.
Yeah.
And I've met one of the king's daughters in terms of we got an award from then to do with rabies in Bangkok, so she presided over. But in terms of actual relationship with her own family, not directly. That's
of course.
But he preached that, and so we tried to get that message across to Thai people as well. But sadly, most want Western pedigree breeds, small breeds, etc., or things like, as you mentioned, huskies or whatever, without even understanding the care these dogs need. And the reality is, most of them, there are a few reputable breeders in Thailand, but most come from pretty awful puppy mills where they're churned out, and a lot of them are not good examples, and a lot of them develop
breeders for profit.
Big problems.
What was the catalyst? So you said that in around 2015, Soi Dog steadily grew, and then in the past 5-6 years, it just exploded. What was the reasoning behind that?
I think probably because, a number of factors. I mean, certainly things do. It started to grow probably before that. I mean, our involvement in the dog meat trade. The dog meat trade, I mean, I've already told you, we do not agree with buying dogs or whatever. But the reality is, a lot of people have got involved in it for that motive, because they've found that they can raise huge amounts of money by rescuing dogs.
Do you think by you were getting involved in that gave exposure to your brand, and then a lot of people started to hear about what you were doing?
That exposure. Then in terms of Bangkok, for example, the Bangkok floods of 2012, which happened at the same time as we were involved, we were heavily involved in that. We were involved in rescuing dogs in terms of the flood. We set up temporary shelters down with Wildlife Friends of Thailand, who had their huge properties down in near Hua Hin. So we were evacuating dogs that had been stranded
and
relocating them. So that also got a lot of media coverage internationally as well. So that again is getting your name up. So more and more people were getting to know about us, and more people
and now it's
were donating.
It's
and
growing.
So it grows, and it's grown on that. It's constantly, obviously, you're trying to maintain that growth. Currently, it is growing. Sorry, I'm swinging my arms about it.
No, don't worry.
It does. It's hard work maintaining that growth, particularly when you're not doing the sort of things that people, like I mentioned, the dog meat trade. Because when you're talking about advocacy, and even sterilisation is not the sort of thing people want to adopt, which is to necessarily donate to. Yeah, organisations will. I mean, half our operation in Bangkok, our mobile operation, is funded by a UK-based charity, big one called Dogs Trust. Well, it's Dog Trust International now. They're a big UK-based charity, but they finance 50% of our mobile teams in Bangkok, and we're looking next year to extend that from 6 to 8 teams. And we get foundations, which is going to foundation, I just heard this week, who will look to finance the setting up of a 10th team to work in the south of Thailand. So but these are more foundations who understand what you're trying to do.
So you guys are working together almost as a community as well.
Yeah, but most of our donations come from literally, we do get get large donations, but most is from, we have sort of thousands of small donors who donate on a monthly basis, and we have programs for them, things like sponsor a dog. So dogs that are never going to be adopted at the shelter, people sponsor. They understand, obviously, it's a bit like the children's sponsors. You can sponsor a child in Africa.
So a large percentage of your donors, they're individual people, but it's that accumulation.
Oh, vast majority.
Do you think that has anything to do with social media and the uprising since pretty much 2015?
Everything. I mean, that is basically why you've got that huge growth is social media. We have, I mean,
so what do you
we have a
rely
volunteer,
on?
I mean, who who is in charge of our digital fundraising on social media.
Yeah.
And he, if you like, we were probably the first in terms of animal welfare charities back in sort of going back to 2000, even before 2015, but starting it to actually see the if you like the prospects of using social media for growth in the charity, in the non-profit sector.
And most of these individuals coming in and contacting you to offer their sponsorship, do you know, are they coming through your YouTube, your Facebook, your Instagram? Facebook primarily.
For us, Facebook.
Facebook.
Yeah, definitely Facebook. I mean, you look at expanding it, but at the moment, Facebook is still, I'm not saying it, well, we also have an Instagram channel.
Yeah.
We also, we do have a YouTube channel, but we don't get many views on YouTube. We don't promote it. It's more, they're there because we promote the videos we're showing are actually getting views.
Yeah, I'm starting to show the dog. You're starting to promote the dogs, like the individual dogs.
Yeah, but they're getting watched. The views are through
Facebook,
through our website or links to our website rather than through YouTube because you're obviously looking, I mean, for people to come and see it. And there's a link there whereby then they can, I want to help that dog. And so they will donate through that. And I mean, if people think but bear in mind, any charity can only do, and people find, for example, fundraising, a dirty word, whatever. You can only do as much as the funds you raise. Mm-hmm. And Soi Dog could still be going along as it was 18 years ago or whatever, going from hand to mouth. I'm trying to support things from my own pocket or whatever without, and just going on as a lot of people do. And they just do that and continue without thinking about raising any funds. We get asked how many times I've forgotten how many people in Thailand have asked us if we will take over a group that they have started. And all of a sudden, it's too much hard work. And they found, yes, it is a hard work.
Well, especially if they don't have their foundations and their procedures set up in their own operations, and you got to do that from scratch. It'd be a nightmare.
Yeah, so they're sort of asking us to take it over. And which is always, generally, no, I'm sorry, because it's just handing over their problems that they've now got. Yeah. They've probably got some land which they don't own, and all of a sudden, the landowners blackmail them or something to up the rent and this sort of thing. And they've ended up without any sort of thinking about it. And what we've tried to do, we do it. You've got to run it almost with a business mentality.
Yeah.
To be honest, if you want to be successful, and in terms, because you can only do as much as the money. That's a fact. Everything you do costs money, and whether it's ending the dog meat trade, and you having to, advertise things, and you're having to give rewards to authorities, to running a shelter. And I actually don't want a shelter, but the shelter would be, it's such a drain on resources because sheltering dogs, paying, all the staff to care for them, the food and everything else, is a huge drain on what I see as the core, which is solving the underlying issue, which is sterilising. I would like to see Soi Dog sterilising dogs in every province in Thailand, large scale, because in that sort of thing, we could solve the problem in no time at all. But so much of our income has to go on treatment and whatever, because at the same time, we will get dogs in for sterilising that, no, we can't return to the streets. We cannot, dogs we keep are dogs that people have, you get somebody abandoning a dog has no idea how to survive. You see Shih Tzus and things that are just dumped, and the things are probably half blind because of, because half these Shih Tzus that are bred from, they're all coming from puppy mills. They're all full of faults. They've got eye issues.
It's still a business you have to run. If your main goal is the sterilization of the dogs, you still have a marketing budget. You have your team. You have operations. You have logistics.
Yeah.
You have your vets. And if you have over 300 people, it's a large operation to build. I had a question though. It's what percentage of charities or foundations that start actually succeed?
It's a good question. I've not studied that, but I mean, certainly in Thailand, if I go back to when I first moved to Thailand, the ones I knew at the time, none exist today, are those that existed at the time. The animal welfare charities I'm talking about, none of them existed, and I'm talking a few of the main ones. There was one in, a very good one in Chiang Mai, a very good one in Bangkok, one in Hua Hin.
And none of them exist anymore, or
none of those exist.
Why do you think that is?
Because they went on because I think the founder. This is the other thing, of course. The founder generally is the person that starts it, and the founder person that carries it. And one of the things Gill, when she was still alive, and this is going back a few years, were determined to do. We talk about things like founder's syndrome. Now, I mean, okay, I'm still heavily involved, and people accuse me of interfering too much. I'm quite sure, but the reality is, Soi Dog is now in a situation, and I explain it how we've done that. But I mean, Soi Dog is now set up as Soi Dog International, based, and the office for that is in Switzerland. There's no physical office. We use
Understood.
A third party, but our board it's in Switzerland, because as much as we have a Soi Dog. We have 7 foundations now across the world. There's Soi Dog USA, Soi Dog UK, Canada. Australia,
to allow you to operate in those areas.
That's basically for raising funds for our work in Asia.
Understood.
But the reality is the control is with Soi Dog International now, because I can never be sure that down the line that our Thai board here is, it has to be predominantly Thai. It's great, but they are, I can't see years after I've gone, 20 years down the line, what could happen. I've seen rogue boards on other charities come in and make a mess of things. So the reality is, and I would foresee in the future Soi Dog doing far more work outside of Thailand. And, that needs to be controlled somewhere else. So Soi Dog International, if you like, is the mothership. And Soi Dog Thailand now has to apply for grants from Soi Dog International.
Correct.
And, okay, Soi Dog Thailand has its own, quite new, has its own fundraising department, and what they raise is Soi Dog Thailand. That belongs to Soi Dog. But
you're
Thailand.
Not using things like Weeboon or.
No, we would hope that Soi Dog Thailand would become financially independent in due course, and Soi Dog International can go on to expand its work into doing more and more in other countries as we grow.
Understood.
But at the moment, it's very, very dependent, obviously, on.
And is this a big part of your success, being able to spread out your division so that the control is, you're not so, all your eggs aren't in one basket in Thailand?
Oh, yeah, very much so. I mean, bear in mind, we raise about 5% of our funds in Thailand and virtually nothing in Phuket. I mean, you think we're a Phuket-based organisation. We get virtually no donations in Phuket. Yeah. And despite the fact that our work is... so much of our work over the years has been to benefit the Phuket businesses, and because if even they don't understand it, the tourist trade in Phuket has benefited greatly, because they think tourists like seeing starving dogs and not dogs lying carcasses and lying dead on the streets. They're wrong. And I know people today say, I could never come to Thailand because I would find it too upsetting. And I write to them now, I said, don't worry, you can come to Phuket. It's not upsetting, okay? And if you come to Soi Dog, you'll find it an uplifting experience, not an upsetting experience. So we can say that to people, and we're bringing in. I mean, Soi Dog if you look at TripAdvisor, on things to do on TripAdvisor, outside of things like places to visit, outside of things like beaches or diving, generic things, you'll see Soi Dog is right up there at the top, and we bring in a lot of tourists.
A lot of tourists, and they come in. And do you have a shop there as well?
We have merchandise shop. I mean, we don't sell the merchandise as such. They can make a donation, and we give them. We have to do that. We have merchandise online internationally. That is a business actually. It's run for the UK. It has to be a company because of its turnover, but it's under all profits. It's a non-profit business with all the profits actually going to Soi Dog UK.
Understood.
Because that's where it's based.
So you're saying people that were not successful, they have founder syndrome. Now, are you meaning that it's
the founder goes and nobody wants to take it over?
Okay.
And they no longer feel they can do it. And quite often they are worn down. I mean, they become ill, they're worn down because it does take over your life. I mean, people contact me now and say, I'm thinking I want to help animals and I'm thinking of doing what you're doing and setting example. I jokingly say don't. Yeah. Then I provise that. I say don't unless you are prepared to donate your whole life to it because it will take over your life. I mean, I work generally probably even today 12 hours and have done.
Still 12 hours a day.
Even today I try to take Sundays off now. I'll still look at briefly emails when I get up just to clear any important ones. But it's not unusual for me to get 200 or 300 emails a day. And
do you see yourself stepping back anytime soon?
I've stepped back.
You're still working 12 hours a day.
I'm still having to do stuff because people still calling me to do things. But the thing is, I'm educating other people to more and more to take over. And there'll come a time when I'm saying, no, you handle that. You can, I got some today and email somebody, oh, what about, I said, you can handle that. Do it, go on with it. If you want a question, ask me, but do it. And it's same like with our CEO and whatever. I copied her in on emails and stuff. I've given myself certain tasks to do. I still work closely with major donors. So, major private donors, trusts, particularly in whatever, who are donating significant amounts of money. And I send personal thank you letters to every week for every major, what I would call a largest donation that comes in. That can be running up to, if we have a very successful appeal, up to 70, 80 a week. So that can be a lot of emails. Okay, I can copy paste things and whatever a lot, but generally it's still, I try to tailor them individually.
But so do you see yourself stepping away completely at all, or is this?
I don't think that will ever happen.
That will never happen.
No, they'll probably be they'll not until unless I do tell everybody I'm going senile because my memory is going terrible.
Well,
so
we'll get you some lion's mane. That's good for that. It's supposed to help with dementia and.
Well, my memory now is getting so bad. I do think it's probably. I'm now 72. Whatever it is, 72 now, 73 coming up. So I'm getting that age, and certainly I need other people to take on board. Yeah. But it is, if I die tomorrow, it's not going to. Soi Dog will continue.
Well, maybe this product will.
That was the objective.
When we get it, we'll ship it to you. Maybe that'll give you another 20, 30 years. But I don't know how happy people there will be.
If I find it works, I'll be buying it. Don't worry.
No. And to attribute to your success, I'll make a bit of an assumption. Does this also have to do with not just yourself, but also Gill, in the sense that Gill had that business background, you had that chemical engineering background as being involved directly in a plant, which brings that the understanding the business side of the operation mixed with the understanding of process, protocol, procedures. Was that the combination that you would attribute to your success?
There should be, and we haven't really spoken much about Gill other than what happened to it. But and I'll say straight out now, Gill was probably the bravest person I've ever met personally. And there's a lot of very brave people, more brave people around the world, but I've not met them because people don't realise. I knew, and she never showed it. A lot of people didn't even realise she was wearing prosthetics. They think, oh, there's something wrong. Maybe she's got a hip problem or something because she'd move a little bit difficulty. But every night she refused after she got her prosthetics ever to use a wheelchair again. And the only time she ever did was at airports because she twigged that if she said she needed a wheelchair assistant, she was whizzed through immigration and whatever. But as soon as she was through, she said to the guy, thanks, okay, that's fine now. And so she could get up and walk around. But she was...
was she the backbone of the operation?
She was... she always used to say, use me, and in terms of funds, because she was an awful lot of people, really looked up to what she'd done and what she got through. People don't realise, the pain she was in every night. I used to see her, she would literally, you imagine in this climate. I remember a doctor telling her that when he left, he said, when she left the hospital in Birmingham, saying, generally speaking, anybody in your situation will not last in prosthetics in Thailand. They just stick to a wheelchair because it is so uncomfortable and so painful and difficult. Losing one leg is one thing. Losing two is incredibly difficult. It's not just twice as hard. It's 3 or 4 times as hard.
Because of the heat.
Well, also, even the pain, when you start, the pain is extremely, it's a lot. But he says, I don't think you're going to be the exception. She said, oh, yes. She was people would tell, a very feisty person. We used to, we could have words more often than not. Because we were opposites in some ways, but she was extremely, every night she would take these off, and you'd have these plastic sockets. Inside that, you have these very thick silicone liners that go directly onto the skin to form suction. On top of that, you then have 2, often 3 thick socks, to form the cushion again, and the sockets would have a little valve in them to actually form a vacuum. And incredibly hot to wear. And she was probably, what's the product called, I've got the name now, but these blister plasters' biggest customer, because every day as she peeled off, she'd be opening up blisters as she peeled off the silicone and slapping blister plasters on. And, I'd hear her in the bathroom, say, whatever. She never complained about it. And if anybody would ask her about it, she'd just say, oh, it's fine, yeah, I'm working, it's okay. And she loved working hands-on, though. For Gill, it was hands-on. She was always at the place. She was always hands-on. She would manage mobile clinics, and she would be out there and going out with dog catchers even. She would manage them, but she'd go out and she'd still be picking dogs up. And she would still be working from early morning till late at night and saying, no, we can do more, and pushing them to do more. We've never had mobile clinics that sterilised as many dogs in them as when Gill was managing. She'd get through doing 80 dogs a day, easy. So, and that's how she was. But people saw her and were aware of what she had done, and so they admired her. And that had an impact. And she did a lot of TV stuff and whatever, which again, particularly for American audience and stuff, got a lot of publicity. She was named, a nation, the first Westerner to be named a Nation of the Year.
I read that, Asian of the Year.
Channel News Asia in Singapore. That was featured obviously across Asia and this sort of stuff. And then she won an Animal Hero Award at the big animal conference. And
was she running more of the business side when you were running?
No, it was the other way around, actually. No, because actually, believe it or not, I do have a sound, stuff. So, although I didn't want to go into it, but I do have a brain, whereas Gill was very much more the hands-on. Don't get me wrong, we would be discussing things, and she had her ideas and I had mine. But we brought on an Australian guy who came and visited us and was blown away at what we were doing back in probably 10 years ago now. Yeah, probably about 10 years. And he was the guy who started very much with the digital fundraising. He was self-taught, but he had been involved in sales and whatever. So he was a volunteer.
Helping to push the whole...
He started out the digital fundraising, which saw the gradual growth of business. So he was responsible a lot for the financial growth.
Streamlining and making it much more easier for your people looking to sponsor as well.
Yeah, making it... but targeting, as I say, if you like, the mass crowd. We have 30 to 40,000 individual donors who are donating, $25 a month, something like that, or whatever, every month. But that's your core, because those are the people, your regular donors is always what he preached, Regular donors are the backbone. It's all right getting a one-off big donation, but if you've got a lot of people donating, can be $10, $15, $20, whatever, every month, that is your core donors, and these are the ones people that are the backbone of the organisation. And these are the people you want. These are the people he tries to work to attract.
And he's still with you now?
Yeah. Still to this day.
And
he's in Australia.
He's being able to do that remotely. Yeah. Where do you see, what is the next major goal for Soi Dog Foundation? Do you have a future milestone that you're working towards that you're able to share? Our milestone, is very much, as I said to you, our mission and whatever, but certainly in terms of
Thailand, it's ongoing. We're looking to expand and increase the number of sterilisations we're doing. At the moment, as I say, Bangkok is the focus, but also now the southern region. We've got teams now working in the adjacent provinces to Phuket. Want to move down to the south because you have got rabies situation near the Malaysian border. There's nobody doing much in that area. And again, I like to work in blocks. So I like to see, right, we're doing the greater Bangkok region. We're also supporting other people as well. We've got people, we've got a project in Chiang Mai we're supporting. We're supporting a project in Pattaya, and we've got, so we are doing one or two others where people are operating along our same guidelines as we do. We'll only support sterilisation projects, not shelters or whatever, because as I say, in terms of we have our own shelters. So
but this is the goal.
Say it's hypocritical, but the reality is we're not going to invest in other people's shelters, and we don't encourage people to start shelters if they can get temples to take.
Would you start more shelters around Thailand?
No, not unless it's something became. I mean, we built a huge shelter in Buriram, massive thing. It holds 3,500 dogs, but that was built. We built it. It's actually on Department of Livestock land again, funny enough. But it was built. We knew that when we did it. But that was built at the height of the dog meat trade because we had all these thousands of dogs that were being intercepted. They were going to drastically overcrowded livestock quarantine centres near the border, like places like Nakhon, Phnom and Mukdahan and whatever. And they couldn't cope with it. And these dogs were literally dying in droves from disease, and we were supplying food and whatever. So we literally, and again, CNN did a documentary on the one at Nakhon Phanom, which is still available. You can see it, which is done on nationwide American TV.
The shelter is still open?
It's there. It's there.
And it's controlled by you guys?
But it's no longer. All the dog meat trade dogs that went there, we gradually got them out, and they gradually got adopted. We still have some of them left in Phuket that never got adopted, and they probably, for one reason or another, they weren't suitable, and so they've never been adopted, and they'll be with us. They're knocking on now. They're older dogs, of course, so they're with us the rest of their lives. What happened, though, sadly, was that, and you can never control that, although we had a verbal agreement that it would be used purely for dog meat trade dogs or potentially for future, it could be mothballed and used for potential natural disasters, like the Bangkok floods or whatever.
But it's still available if you needed to use it.
Yeah. Sadly, they did start to use it for dogs from other areas, which were people were complaining about. So the livestock would pick dogs and shove them in there.
Okay.
I think even they're trying to cut it down. They don't want to be involved in dogs. The livestock department in Phuket don't want to be involved in dogs. Livestock, you see it by the name, but because there's no other organisation, they get lumbered, if you like, with managing the dog pound now. The dog pound, that was supposed to be going into the aubergines control, but then they refused to take it. So normally it comes under the governor, who gives it to the livestock department to manage. But it's, it is a dog pound. It's not a shelter. Shelter gives the vision of it being a nice place for dogs. It isn't. We were banned from there for a long time and recently, because of, I think they used COVID as an excuse, we were banned again earlier this year. We've just had meetings with the new livestock chief who's come on board, and we're back in there.
Banned in which sense?
Not allowed in.
Why?
Because they said, the excuse was it was changing from livestock to aubergines, which was not true. But nevertheless, they all then said, COVID, it's too dangerous, we want to protect the staff. But they wouldn't let anybody in, Thai volunteers as well. There's a group of Thai volunteers who were going in to help. So they just had the staff. We know because we do head counts. We vaccinate, people say, don't you get any help from the government? No, the other way around. As with Buriram, we still supply vaccines and things to Buriram. We vaccinate all the dogs in the dog pound. We provide tick and treatment, drugs and whatever. We have a vet goes there every week to treat dogs. They've allowed, that we used to have people going every day to treat. We even employed somebody to go in there.
But now with the current situation, it's
now
not too easy.
They stopped us going in.
Yeah. Have you?
But we are back in now. I have to say, the governor has allowed that. We've now, the new chief has allowed that limited access, but we can go in, and we can revaccinated all the dogs, but we know 200 have died there this year, just from number counts, from how many were there when we vaccinated them all, because we counted them all. We knew how much were there at the start of the year. So over 200 have died in 6 months. So it's no paradise. Dogs, they kill each other because you get so many. Again, there's too many dogs in one area.
Yeah.
They die from all sorts of reasons.
This is a bit of a strange question, but I think it's something that might come up later. Maybe not this year, maybe next year. And with the current situation, we try to avoid that word just because I don't know if YouTube's going to they shadow ban your content or whatever. But with the current situation, have you had any thoughts in which it will come to the point in which you need to vaccinate the dogs because maybe they could spread the current situation? Or is this completely bollocks?
Any talk of dogs being able to spread, there are certain diseases which can spread from animals to humans. They're known as zoonotic diseases. Okay? And certain diseases can. There's one that's obviously at the moment has been in the news a lot, to put it mildly, which we won't name.
Yep.
There is absolutely no way that a dog can spread that particular disease.
Can they contract it?
Well, there was a story of, I think, a case in Korea where somebody had the disease and they had it. Did the dog have a very mild form of it? I think afterwards it was disproved. I heard later it was disproved. But of course, whenever anybody comes up with anything like that, immediately the main thing is it gets on the news that it could, but it didn't. And I think scientists have been quite categorical about it. No, they can't. Same as a dog cannot spread flu. You can pick up rabies from a dog, which is why we are working very hard. As every dog we sterilise, we vaccinate. Phuket is the only officially recognised by the government province in Thailand that is recognised as being rabies free, and that's because of we've vaccinated all the dogs basically.
So why is that they could spread one type of, now rabies would be considered a virus?
Yeah, it's just certain diseases are zoonotic, so they can spread from animals to humans, and or from certain types of animals to humans. And for example, again, it's believed that one it's been in the media a lot lately.
The bat
has, they don't know for sure how. It's rumoured that it could have started with bats, spread to another animal that's then spread to human, but nobody really knows for sure.
See, that's why I kind of asked that question, because if it can spread from there, then why couldn't it spread from the dogs and then that would
exactly.
Kind of
and the reality is now with what you're seeing with, for example, dogs and cats being domestic animals, and in so many homes, you would have large number of cases of dogs and cats now ill with the same disease that the owners have, and they don't.
That at all.
Not at all. No, not at all. I think there's been one case where one case I'm aware of where where they were talking about it potentially a dog having caught this disease, but then later it was said no, it's disproved. So it's like certain animals can spread certain things. I mean, a dog can spread rabies to humans. It can spread it to certain other animals, but not to all animals. Certain animals can catch rabies, some can't. It just depends on it's all down to genetics, I believe. But so a lot of diseases. I mean, dogs, the biggest disease in Thailand for dogs, the biggest killer is one called distemper, and parvovirus is very common in puppies. We as humans cannot contact distemper or parvovirus, but I did see an article the other day turning in Korea where they were talking about dogs. Some dogs had died from measles.
Okay, but that's impossible.
Absolutely impossible. But measles and distemper, there is a connection between the two, but the two are different. But distemper, if you like, could be in the same family, but you cannot get distemper, and a dog cannot get measles. But they are loosely connected in the same family, I understand.
Okay, so you haven't had anyone approach you to test the dogs with the fun swab or anything like that? Okay.
No.
I was interested to ask that. I had one more question. It was more of a personal question. So I had a friend that had a dog, and the dog was spayed.
Yeah.
But then every 6 months, it still would get its period, I guess, right? Now, I read into that, and I went online and tried to understand, because there would be some blood, and it would get on the couch, and then the dog it was normal. It's fine in the house, but when you take this, and it was a Soi Dog that they found in Nyan. Now, when you walk this dog on a leash, it's a nightmare. You cannot walk it. You've tried to train it. It's impossible. In the house, great dog, but on the leash, it wants to sniff everything. It does a little move where it wants to get off the leash, and once it's off, it's gone. So we were trying to connect that to maybe what happened was when it was spayed, it was not spayed correctly, and that there's still some of the ovary inside.
Right.
And
There's two possibilities here. Right. One of them, I mean, an ultrasound, for example, take a dog to a vet would tell you straight away. There are some people who advocate, including some Thai vets, when you sterilise a dog, just remove the uterus, which is, part of the female anatomy where obviously the sperm travels up. So if that's gone, tied off and whatever, a bit like a vasectomy in a man. So the dog cannot get pregnant, but it's still got the ovaries, so it's still coming into season every 6 months. Okay? The other possibility is that, the vet who did it may have been a little bit inexperienced, and apparently you only need to leave a few cells.
This is what I mean.
And dog could still come into season. It can be taken care of if it caused a problem. I mean, for example, a vet, certainly, it's a skill, you could take it back to vet and they could reoperate on it and make sure any trace is removed. So that would stop it coming into season.
Would that be recommended?
I don't know how old the dog is or whatever.
2 or 3.
Well, I would say probably. Might be worth doing if it's a young dog.
And would that help calm it down a bit as well?
I'm not well, it's unusual. Not necessarily a female dog to go scenting or whatever is not necessarily down to that, because a female dog would certainly be, biologically, would get the impulse to mate when it's in season. But out of season, generally, she would, any male dog came near her, she'd probably go for it.
Yeah,
It's only when they're in season that an animal will...
And still in season, no, she doesn't do much.
And I mean, generally, obviously it's in season, and he'll keep her away from other dogs, not because there's a risk of getting pregnant, but because there's a risk of, she's just going to get gangbanged, basically, if she was out on the street.
Yeah, by all the dogs running.
So he could, I don't know where he's based, but potentially if the dog's got a tattoo in its ear, and he can look for that if he's got a tattoo, because we always tattoo every dog he's got a tattoo in both ears. It can be faint, but you can see it, and generally if it's in the last 2 or 3 years, it should be quite clear on what it'll be a number on it, and that will tell us where and when it was sterilised. If it's a sterilisation we've done, I can tell you straight away, and I'd have to speak to our Director of Animal Welfare if it's not, but if it isn't, then I'd ask her advice as to whether we could bring the dog in and we could take care of that, re-sterilise.
Because I heard also it can be potentially bad for them, in which when you haven't removed the ovaries completely and you've left a couple cells, it could leave to tumors later in life.
There's one of the big issues in Thailand is, sadly, a lot of Thai people, they can buy a pill off from the vet, and it basically stops the dog coming into season. So it's like a contraceptive pill. Now, that same pill is banned virtually in every Western country. It's totally banned. It's cheap, but it's banned. There is another one that's, I forget the names now, but it's quite expensive, that is safe. You'd be amazed at how many dogs we sterilise, who own dogs, because we sterilise any dog. We sterilise own dogs. It doesn't matter if the person, we like to give a donation, great, but it doesn't matter. We will sterilise any dog, because we know perfectly well that most of these dogs are going out on the street and are going to get mated, and then they'll have puppies and probably end up being dumped or whatever anyway. So we sterilise any dog, owned or stray. The number of owned dogs we see that have pyometra, which is a killer, and it's basically an infection of the womb, and that is down to those tablets.
Okay.
And that's why it's banned in most countries, but it's not banned in Thailand. And vets give them out to anybody, left, right, and centre. And people think, they don't realise them.
It's a one-time pill, or
no? It's every few months. Or they'll take this pill. And pyometra is a killer. And by sterilising a dog, you're far less likely, also it does have benefits, you're far less likely for the dog to get cancer of the womb and this sort of thing. Obviously, there's less chance of that happening. Dogs can still get cancer of other organs. But it's the same with male dogs. They're far less likely to, they're not going to get cancer of dogs can get testicular cancer, same as humans can. And they're not going to get that once they're castrated.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's it actually does have benefits.
And that's that's what I was thinking too.
But if he's that way, I mean, I've allowed to ask him to check for tattoo in the ears, a matter of interest. I'm not saying we had the odd case particularly where we've had an inexperienced vet and we've had the ones come back where we know, the dog that's gone overseas, being adopted, and it was coming into season. That's the issue. Is that the vet misses only
a little bit,
tiny little bit. It can do it, but that can be taken care of post-operation. Obviously, it's not advantageous. You don't be putting a dog through surgery unnecessarily.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it's causing an issue, whether that dog will sniff it any less, his behaviour.
Yeah, it was
going to
more
change
a
it. I
question
would
of
think unlikely.
If it could cause like tumors down the road, and if it's safer to do it or not to do it, what makes more sense?
Yeah, there are far more benefits for male dogs. A male dog, I mean, people don't realise this. I mean, one of the reasons we focus our sterilisation efforts on in the streets is on always female dogs first. If we see a male and a female and we know they are not going to be picked up, we've got to dart them. And when you dart one, boom, they're both off. Our dog catchers are told, if you can see they're a male and a female, you go for the female.
Yeah.
Because you never get every dog, in fact, because there's always going to be some up in the jungle that you're never going to get, and they come down, for food or whatever, and if they see a female, they'll mate it. You only need one male dog, and they have phenomenal scent, as dogs. I mean, and they can scent a dog with the wind in the right direction that's in heat up to 10 kilometres away, they say. So, and they're all drawn to that dog. So the dog will roam. If he smells dog bitches in heat, they will roam. In terms of once the dog is castrated, it takes time for their testosterone and things to come down. But once it's gone down, they're far less likely to be wandering. A lot of Thais think, they're not going to be as good with guard dogs. Totally the opposite. The reality is they're not going to wander. So therefore, they're still going to be just as protective of the home as they were before. They'll actually be better guard dogs because they're not going to be wandering off on the streets, potentially causing accidents.
Don't they become more relaxed? Maybe they lose a little pep in their step from before they were neutered?
I think it depends on the dog. I've heard of cases like that, but believe you me, I mean, we've got hundreds of resident dogs, all the males are all castrated, and they're all different personalities. Dogs are all different personalities. You've got placid dogs, male dogs, whatever. I've got, my dogs at home, I've got placid ones. Generally speaking, female dogs are either castrated or non-castrated. Female dogs tend to be more aggressive, in my opinion.
Well, they become the alphas, right?
Yeah, than the male dogs. And generally male dogs are more relaxed. When there's a bitch in season or whatever, they can become very territorial and aggressive. But generally speaking, you're always going to get this up. It depends how a dog is brought up. I mean, there's fighting dogs. We know there are dogs raised here for dog fighting.
Yeah.
And if any of those don't make the grade and are dumped, nevertheless, they've been raised for fighting.
Does this still exist in Thailand?
Yeah. And so, it's all to do with gambling.
Yeah.
Pit bulls, you'll...
How underground is that?
Very underground. It's illegal.
It's not... This would exist in Phuket, or it's more the big cities like Bangkok?
We knew of cases in Phuket, and we know, again, of dogs being pulled out of temples off the street to be used as bait dogs to be ripped to pieces by the fighting dogs to build up the aggression as part of the training.
This is... Do you get these dogs that come in for help, and you see this happening in Phuket?
Yeah, we see... I mean, don't be wrong, we see pit bulls that have obviously dumped on the street that have been used in fighting. There's no doubt, their ears are cropped and they've got scars on them and whatever. So I think they're past the fighting stage, and if maybe the owners will just dump them.
But how do you crack down on that?
Very difficult, because again, it's underground. And who's to say that, you've seen cases recently in terms of in Phuket where there was a gambling casino going on, and sadly the head of police has been suspended and whatever. So, who's involved in it?
Yeah.
And it is always a problem in terms of corruption in Thailand, sadly. And we've been told about cases, and again, trying to watch or observe these things is very difficult. It goes on same as it still goes on in North America, and it's illegal in North America, and it's illegal in the UK. Does that mean it's stopped? No, it doesn't. It still goes on, but it's done very secretly, and it's same here.
Yeah, and maybe that's something we don't dive too far into, so we don't end up with a bullet in the back of it. I'm joking. All right, I think we covered a lot today. I had those were kind of my own personal questions at the end. On that note, and anything that you want to plug in terms of your website, your Instagram, any type of social stuff, or what you're doing next, take it away. That camera right there.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, well, all I'd say is, like I said earlier, we're always in need of donations. So if you feel you want to donate, because literally what I said, we can only do as much as the donations we receive, and the reality is there's never enough donations to what we would like to be doing. I'm not going to, you'll find us easily on Facebook, but in terms of seeing what we do, just go to www.soidog, SOIDOG.org, short for organisation. So it's www.soidog.org. Personal plug, you will see on the website, actually, on our merchandise, I wrote a book, a biography about Gill. Recently, I'm not trying to brag here, but it won an award in the UK. It won the National Reader's Choice Award for non-fiction. It's not available directly in Thailand. It is on Amazon, certainly Amazon UK it's on, and you can buy it directly on our website, including post and packing. And it tells a lot the story of Soi Dog, but particularly it's about Gill and her life and her background. Hence the book is called Just Gill. And I wrote it. It took about a year to write it. It's written as a tribute to her. Yeah, that's in tribute to her. So that's about it. But any of you do support us, thank you very much for your support. I say we couldn't do it without you. And if you see a dog that's in trouble or hasn't been sterilised, our helpline again is on the website. I'm not going to read it out to you now, but it's there. We do have in emergencies, true emergencies, we do have a 24-hour helpline. But if it, unless that is literally, if it's a night, middle of the night, please, unless a dog is being hit by a car and is dying, if it's got, you see it with skin problems, you're coming back from the pub and you see a dog with skin problems, please wait until office hours before you call us in. But normally speaking, we will respond, and particularly for dogs who are stray dogs or cats in need of medical care and who are not sterilised. We will always come and sterilise them. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks a lot, guys. That was with John Dalley, the co-founder of Soi Dog Foundation. We'll leave his handles up and all the information in the descriptions below. Thanks again for watching another episode of Fruiting Body Podcast. At the end of this week on Friday, we have an amazing guest coming on. He is a vegan chef. We won't give too much more detail on that, and we'll leave that up to you. Actually, no, I think it's Thursday. Anyways, those episodes are a little bit later. So thanks again, John. Thank you, Talise, and that's all.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Yeah, it's good.